Buenas noches, everyone. Welcome to the Governing Board meeting of the Mount Diablo Unified School District for January 27th, 2021. If you need translation, there is an interpretation button at the bottom that you can push to join our Spanish translation.
Si necesita traducción al español, busque el botón con un icono en forma de círculo que dice Interpretation o desde un celular oprima sobre los tres puntos y luego oprima sobre Language Interpretation.
Muchas gracias. All right, bienvenidos, welcome everyone. We are reconvening our open session and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance and roll call. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we will move on to roll call. And we'll begin with our student trustee, Trustee Alice.
Here.
All right, Trustee Mason.
Here.
Trustee Mayo.
Here.
Trustee McFerrin.
Here.
And Trustee Nzewi. All right. Thank you, everyone. All right, so 6.2, review and potential approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
I have two changes.
Okay.
First of all, I want to change on item 11.2. We have that listed as an action item, and it's an info item.
All right.
And then for item 11.3, he is doing several presentations tonight with other boards, and so just permission for if they come on a little late, we can put them in when they come, if they show up after their designated time.
All right. Duly noted. 11.3 will move to when the presenter is available. Thank you. Any other changes to the agenda? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda with those changes. Second.
All right. Motion by Trustee Mason and second by Trustee Mayo. And we'll put it to a vote. Trustee Alice?
Yes.
Trustee Mason?
Yes.
Trustee Mayo?
Yes.
Trustee Nzewi? Trustee McFerrin?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Motion approved. All right. Thank you. So we'll start with our report out from closed session. 7.1 was negotiations. The board may discuss negotiations or provide direction to its representatives regarding represented employees pursuant to EERA Government Code Section 3549.1. Agency negotiators, Dr. Adam Clark, Dr. John Rubio, Dr. Dan Scudero, Dr. Lisa Gonzalez, Dr. Wendy Aguili, Jennifer Sachs, Cesar Alvarado, and Mike Berg. Agencies Medea, DMA, MDSPA, CSEA, CST Local 1, and Teamsters Local 856. We received information and provided direction. Item 7.2, discipline, dismissal, release, or reassignment of public employee, Government Code Section 54957B1. One case was delayed. There was no information or action on that item. All right. And so now we'll move along to public comment. The public may address the board regarding any item within the jurisdiction of the Board of Education of the Mount Diablo Unified School District that is not on this agenda. These presentations are limited to 3 minutes each, or a total of 30 minutes for all speakers, or the 30-minute limit. The 3-minute limit may be shortened. If there are multiple speakers on any one subject, the public comment period may be moved to the end of the meeting. Speakers are not allowed to yield their time. And we always like to say that when you're providing public comment live like this, to keep in mind that we as the board cannot engage in a discussion with you. According to the Brown Act, that item would have to be put on an agenda and there would be notification needed instead. But during public comment, we can ask questions, clarifications, and basically that's what we can do. So we listen very carefully, but we're not going to engage in a discussion. All right. So let's see. So as Ms. Juranek put, if you would like to make a public comment, please put your name into the chat. And Mr. Breidenthal or Dr. Clark, who is going to be managing the names for this part?
Mr. Breidenthal and Mr. Breidenthal will manage the names.
All right. Thank you very much. And I will leave it to you, Mr. Breidenthal. Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Count. I'll turn it over to Ms. Juranek, who's taking public comment item this evening.
Thank you. So far, we have one individual who has been admitted. So, Mr. Knoll, I'm afraid I'm going to mispronounce your last name. So,
It's Fruitneck. It's much easier than it looks.
thank you. I'll have you come ahead and speak, and when your 3 minutes will begin when you begin speaking.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Noel Fruitneck. I have 2 middle school students in the district. I've got to be honest, tonight's agenda is disgraceful. It's completely tone deaf. Where is the agenda item for a detailed report on the specific plans for reopening the district to our students? Why is this not a standing agenda item at every board meeting for the last 10 months? It should be. This lack of information and transparency is causing parents to make profound decisions regarding next fall that are detrimental to the district in terms of enrollment numbers. And you all may not get that to rise up to your level, and you may not be hearing that. But as the parent groups that are talking, this is a real risk to the district next fall. Is there a detailed plan? If so, why has that not been shared with the parents? There's a nice weekly newsletter with rainbows and unicorns and generalities and superlatives. Where are the specific detailed plans? Board, why are you not demanding specific detailed plans? Again, we've been at this for 10 months. We can't just be making it up as we go now. Our students and parents deserve better. And board, if you are unwilling to stand up to the tyranny of the CTA and demand action from Dr. Clark and his staff, maybe it's time for parents to begin the recall process and find board members who will. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comment has been received. And next we have Mr. Diego Harris. Your 3 minutes will begin when you begin speaking.
I think I made a mistake. I think I'm supposed to go later on, right? Okay, sorry about that. My confusion. Sorry about that.
No problem. All right. At this point, I don't have any other individuals who are asking to speak.
I do see a question of whether board comments are read. The board comments that come in through email are available to all of us as board members to read as they come in. And then they are posted publicly for the public to be able to read as well. So we don't actually read those verbally out loud because they are available for everyone to see.
And President Cohn, we do have Laura Steele who's asked to speak.
Okay.
And Ms. Steele, you've got 3 minutes. Your 3 minutes will begin when you begin speaking. Ms. Steele?
Ms. Steele, it looks like you are muted. There we go.
I apologize. Okay, just give me one moment. Thank you. I wanted to thank you for the continued efforts that you guys were able to agree on for the small groups, the special cohorts. And I know that there is a lot of available information, but similar to what Noel mentioned, there is a difficulty in parents actually accessing that information. There are a lot of families who are hesitant to speak up, and frankly, there's just a lot of people who are very busy working and don't have time to invest in all the ins and outs of what the district is doing to prepare for a return back to school. I understand that you guys are doing a lot, but I do think that a lot more could be communicated in a timely manner, and also that there is a lot of talk amongst parents to remove their children from school the following school year through either private school or homeschool. And I'm not sure that the district is prepared for what that might look like, because we haven't had another survey. The survey we had was months ago, and it was only reflecting a hybrid program that is no longer being offered. We have not had a new survey to reflect people's willingness to come back with that new plan. So I would like for there to be a new survey to ask if people are willing to remain distance learning, offer a hybrid, and a third option to do whatever their teacher is willing to do, since we saw there were a lot of people who were most interested in staying with their teacher. And I know that that's a huge undertaking, but I think it's extremely necessary because, like I said, there's just a lot of people who are ready to jump ship here. So I really appreciate your guys' continued efforts, and I know that it's in good faith. I really, really hope to impress that upon you guys, that the benefits of distance learning, which were meant to be short-term, I believe have now been outweighed by some of the consequences that we're facing at home. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And we do have another public comment, Jill Walson. Please unmute, and your 3 minutes will begin once you begin speaking.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I know I'm speaking for thousands of families in the Mount Diablo Unified School District, children who are in regular education as well as special education. We need an active plan. We demand higher expectations from our elected board members, superintendent, and the union. We need a choice for our children. We know this is a heavy lift, yet it has been almost a year. How is this not the #1 priority for our board meeting? Neighboring districts and other districts in California have a plan and are executing it. Please research what they're doing with unions that are strong. They are coming together and working together for the best interest of our children. There is research that is showing that we can do this even with teachers not fully vaccinated. Parents need a choice. I believe in public education. I want my children to stay in this district, but there are so many families that cannot function this way. I speak on behalf of thousands of families who are scared to speak up. We are seeing it. Children, the learning loss, the mental health is so huge. Please, I beg you to take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And President Cowan, that appears to be our final public comment.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you everyone who made a public comment tonight. We appreciate you coming forward. and sharing your perspectives. Next, we have 9.0 communications. 9.1 is district organizations. At regular board meetings, a single spokesperson of each recognized district organization may make a brief presentation. Items are limited to those which are informational. Do we have any speakers of district organizations?
Thank you, Board President Count. No employee organizations have submitted statements, nor have any employee organizations elected to speak in person tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so then we'll move on to item 10.0, recognition and resolutions. 10.1, Resolution 2021-40 in recognition of February as Black and African American History Month. And I will turn it over to Dr. Clark.
Great. Thank you so much, President Cowan. So tonight we're, as we have different resolutions at every meeting, tonight we are recognizing Black and African American History Month, which takes place in February. And as per protocol, I will read the opening paragraphs and the finishing paragraph, and then we do have 3 speakers here tonight who will speak on this topic, and then we'll put it to the board for consideration. So if I may, I'd like to present Resolution 20/21-40 in recognition of February as Black and African American History Month. Whereas the deep-rooted intrinsic value of Black and African American history presents our educational institutions with an opportunity for recognition, teaching, and celebration. And whereas Mount Diablo Unified School District recognizes and celebrates the history and contributions of Black and African Americans who have been overlooked, misinterpreted, and undervalued in the curriculum of public education institutions. So, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mount Diablo Unified School District Governing Board proclaims the month of February as Black and African American History Month and encourages all schools to commemorate this occasion accordingly with appropriate instructional materials, discussions, presentations, and projects. Be it further resolved that this executed resolution be distributed to all schools within the Mount Diablo Unified School District. So before I call on our 3 speakers, I also do want to recognize that our county superintendent is visiting our meeting this evening, Ms. Lynn Mackey, and we want to welcome her to our meeting. And without any further ado, I'm going to call first on Mr. Harris, then I will call on Dr. Frazier, and then we will finish up with Mr. Mims. So Mr. Harris, your comments, please.
Thank you. About 20 years ago, I had a professor tell me that one day I'd be speaking to a group of important people. I didn't realize it at the time that he was foreshadowing my career as a special education teacher talking to students. Board members, Dr. Clark, and people who are listening, you are important too. My name is Diango Harris. I'm president of Mount Diablo Black Educators Association. On behalf of myself and the members of MDBEA, I would like to express our unwavering support of the proposed board resolution and recognition of February as Black History and African American History Month. Black history is American history and should be a continuous part of our curriculum across all grade levels. It is my hope that all teachers will utilize the resources being provided to recognize Black history in their classes, not just for the month of February, but for all the months of the school year. We do a disservice to all our students when we withhold such valuable information from them. This resolution will only have an impact when we choose to enact its principles at our sites and in our classrooms. It is our responsibility as educators to teach our students the true, accurate history of this country and its people, all its people. In order to truly address the systemic racism that exists within our district and our schools, we require equity in action, not just in words. At this time, I would like to switch gears into another role I value as an educator. I am also the faculty club advisor for College Park's Black Student Union. This role has enabled me to be in contact with members of our community who have reached out to me because they would like to support the BSU. Most recently, I've been able to collaborate with Lloyd Sheen, who's a member of the City of Pleasant Hill Civic Action Commission Diversity Committee. The committee reached out to me because they are looking for a few local Pleasant Hill High School students to discuss why Black History Month is important to them. If there is ever a highlight of goodness to come out of distance learning and Zoom meetings, it is meeting weekly with the BSU students. We've had guest speakers, including our very own Dr. Clark, teachers from College Park, and Dr. Carrie Frazier. The students have discussed a range of topics that have been on their minds and hearts. One of the most poignant and moving meetings is when we discussed their experiences with racism as students. One student shared her experience of going to a back to school night event and being asked afterwards why her father was not there. Was he in jail or prison? To say I didn't see red after hearing that would be an understatement. That is why I'm encouraged when Dr. Clark proposed forming an anti-bias and anti-racism committee. One of my favorite quotes is from legendary Green Bay Packers coach Vince Lombardi. If winning isn't everything, then why do they keep score? I played football in high school. I was determined to be a starter. Even though I didn't know what the word mediocrity meant back then, I loathed mediocrity when it came to playing football. I longed to be on the field where the action was. I was not about going through the motions and just happy to be on the team. I desired to make a difference on our team winning. Two things I thought I would become when I grew up was a rapper or being in the NFL. As you can see, the rap game didn't work out, yet there's still a glimmer of hope for the NFL, which means newfound look, not the National Football League. I am certain those who are fortunate enough to make it to the National Football League want to have a Hall of Fame career, stand out even amongst the best. I have stars in my eyes when I say this. What about us, the Mount Diablo Unified School District? As school districts across the country, the state, and even right here in the Bay Area deal with the scourge of white supremacy and systemic racism, there are many who are despondent and cynical, yet they still hope that this time of reckoning, of equality and social justice will actually be a catalyst for the unity that is needed to overcome the societal ills of hate. I'm currently reading the book, Rising Out of Hatred, The Awakening of a White Nationalist. The book is about Derek Black, a young man whose father, Don Black, was at one time the Grand Wizard of the KKK and still currently runs the online white nationalist hate site Stormfront. Derek's transformation from his white supremacist ideology took place because of the hand of kindness that was extended to him by the students at his college who did not recoil from him as a person. In turn, he was able to realize the impact his actions had on people he never wanted to harm. The problem with white supremacy and systemic racism is its impact, the left behind and undealt with trauma of people left in its wake. For those who are impacted by its evil tentacles, it is distressing and nightmarish. Leftover grief and sorrow accompany and linger on for those wounded by systemic racism and white supremacy, which brings me back to winning. What if Mount Diablo School District is the beacon of hope and light with our anti-bias, anti-racism committee and commitment to Black History Month? Optimistically, that is what I am confident we can become together. A Hall of Fame district where other districts look to on how to properly address white supremacy and systemic racism. In closing, this morning, I read a bulletin from the National Terrorism Advisory System that warned about domestic violent extremists taking action. They gave a warning and also a way to help, and I quote, "Communities are strongest when they are not divided. Strengthen your community by standing together against violence," unquote. I would add to that, stand against racial microaggressions and racial bias in all its forms. Thank you, board members, Dr. Clark, and all others who are listening. I look forward to working as a unified front together. Your brother in education, Diango Harris.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harris.
Thank you. And Dr. Frazier.
Good evening to the school district. I've had the pleasure of being a consultant off and on with the district for over 10 years, and just wanted to highlight the latest work that I was involved in, and that was with, in the past 4 years, being able to present Black History exhibits at Bel Air and Shore Acres Elementary School, as well as Riverview Middle School. And I've also had the privilege of presenting exhibits for Hispanic Heritage Month, as well as Asian Pacific Islanders Month. And to date, those exhibits have been attended by 5,420 students and 60 teachers. And I want to highlight that because we're in a time where some people find it hard to figure out what to do. I think that we've had examples in many different areas of things that could be progressive and could move along the agenda of racial equality, but the consistency has not been there. And so I was really pleased to hear Brother Harris talk tonight about his dream for the district. And since I've been able to be there, kind of boots on the ground, I know it's possible. And so I look forward to the committee that's going to be looking at lesson plans and other activities for students to have over this month as developing a model that could be used throughout the district. And it does not have to be just for Black people. If you can come up with a model that's fair and equitable and it's respectful, it can be used for everyone, all people in the district. And so I'm hopeful and I'm looking forward to see the possibility of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier.
Thank you. And Mr. Mims. Okay.
Sorry about that, I was muted. Good evening, everyone. To the superintendent, to the school board, and to the Zoom community at large. I want to thank all of you for allowing me to speak as a guest on this very important agenda item. I'm the education chair of the East County NAACP. I'm here as a member of the Mount Diablo Black Educators Association. We are in total support of this Black and African American history resolution. History is important to one's intellectual and psychological well-being. In all of my years in elementary school, middle school, and high school, I never saw or learned anything about the history of Black people in this country. What did I learn, however, was the fact that we were all slaves. I had nothing to be proud of, especially of Africa, where I was told that my people were running around the jungle with no shoes. As a boy, I grew up without having a sense of pride. I was missing one crucial thing, knowledge of my history. And the small amount of the misinformational historical knowledge that I had was basically the same that everyone else had. I grew up having an inferior history to those whom I believe had a history superior to mine. Over the years, a few things have changed, and some African-American history is now being taught, but not enough. I hope that this resolution perhaps will change that. From 1619, our ancestors have been, or my ancestors have been on this soil, and we all came and changed. The current history book spends very little time on discussing the 246 years of enslavement of Black people in this country, and only presents a limited discussion on the major role that Black soldiers played in every war, especially the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and the Civil War. It was the Black soldiers who were responsible for all of those victories. I did not know any of this during my 12-year educational journey. I was deprived, and so were my fellow students. This deprivation is detrimental to all students, depriving them of America's rich history. I encourage the board to adopt this Black History resolution tonight. And a couple more things I want to say. In your resolution, it has something that I think that's not accurate, but I've seen that in everybody else's resolution. That's in paragraph 4 regarding Crispus Attucks. It said, according to the your staff report, it says that he was the first African American to die in that Revolutionary War. He was the first person to die, not just African American, but the first person to die. I want to get that straight. So he could qualify that because I've seen that in a whole lot of resolutions. So that small amount of information is not true. One of the things that I would suggest that this school district do start off with is to get some clarity and qualification on the word slave, because the concept and the mindset that people have is that Black people were slaves. Well, you know, when they came here, and I was telling somebody in the pocket, when they came here, they came here as prisoners of war. They did not come here as slaves. They did not bring slaves out of Africa. So that concept and that understanding or misunderstanding should be made clear to your students, because they think when you mention slaves, so, well, you know, that the mindset, well, they were slaves. No, you can't see a slave, but you can see a human being. To use the word slave, the term slave, is a form of dehumanization. You are dehumanizing these people. So you can see a child with chains and shackles around his or her hands or neck. But anyway, I don't want to get off topic here. I see Brother Clark looking at me. I just want to make sure that the first thing that I would like folks to do is to get some clarification on the people that they brought out of Africa. They brought human beings out of Africa, men and women, boys and girls, babies, and not slaves. Okay, thank you. But anyway, thanks for listening to me, and I hope I've done something here. And I hope that you pass this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, President Count. It is now in the hands of the board.
All right. Thank you very much to each of you for your important presentations tonight. I just want to say, Mr. Harris, when you talked about not just February, but all months, that's definitely something that we're all looking at. And is absolutely what we need to be doing. Dr. Frazier, when you talked about developing a model that could be used throughout the district, that's fantastic. I think that's exactly the direction that we need to go. And Mr. Mims, when you talked about well, you talked about a number of things, but a couple of things. One, when you were talking about 1619, I was thinking about the 1619 project and what an incredible resource of information and education that is to get into the accuracy of the facts there, like you were talking about. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. With that, we'd like to open it up to the board. Would someone like to make a motion for this resolution? Trustee Nzewi, it looks like you are muted, or perhaps your sound is. Oh.
Still can't hear.
We still can't hear you. What did you have headphones before?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay. There we go.
I make the motion to pass this, the Black History Month resolution.
All right, thank you. Motion by Trustee Nzewi. Do we have a second?
I would like to second that motion and just say that having been born and raised in what was West Pittsburgh at the time, now Bay Point, which is always a very diverse community, I've always really felt strongly about this resolution and always stated every year since I've been on the board, where we talk about it this month, we are supposed to be doing it every single day in every single way. And even though it's always resonated with me, I think this particular year, it takes on more importance and resonates even more. And I hope we can become a model for other districts in the area to really step up and make this a regular part of our conversations.
Thank you very much. Second by Trustee Mason, and thank you for your comments. Yes, and that's exactly what we state in the resolution itself, that it is really the state history social science framework for California public schools that requires this, the appropriate history curriculum and experiences of men and women of different racial, religious, and ethnic groups that must be integrated at every level. So this is what we are required to do, not just for the month of February. So thank you for pointing that out. Any other comments before we move to a vote? Yes, Trustee Nzewi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Harris. And Dr. Frazier and Mr. Mims. As a child of the 80s who grew up in the Central Valley of California, where I was often the only Black child in my elementary school class, my Black history education primarily went like this. There were slaves, some lynchings here and there, then Rosa, then Martin, and now all is well. As a child of the 80s, my Black history was taught by my parents. Anyone my age watching tonight may remember the documentary Eyes on the Prize. That was must-watch TV for me, recorded on VHS tapes and revisited year after year after year. It's only because of my parents that I learned about Ida B. Wells, Madam C.J. Walker, Chappie James, Malcolm X, Alvin Ailey, George Washington Carver, Toni Morrison, Langston Hughes, Josephine Baker, Nina Simone, among many other influential and historical figures, not to mention historical events. I think most agree today that's not right. And I'm inspired by the many teachers in our district who on their own do everything they can to provide a multicultural curriculum to their students, and not only during Black History or other defined months. I'm inspired by students and parents who recognize and stand up against racist and sexist lessons. I appreciate the decades-long advocacy of Mr. Willie Mims and Dr. Carrie Frazier on behalf of Black students and families. I stand on their shoulders, the shoulders of my parents and ancestors, the shoulders of Shirley Chisholm, Audre Lorde, Georgia Gilmore. I hope that our students learn much more than I did as a child about Black history this February and all year long, and I eagerly await voting yes on this resolution.
Thank you so much, Trustee Nzewi. Wonderful, wonderful to have you as a member of our board. Any other comments or questions?
I wanted to say
Yes.
thank you so much, everybody who spoke, and that I hope this paves the way for culturally responsive teaching and the active implementation of ethnic studies in all grade levels and in all classes. And I know that there was a tweet circulating by Miss Reed, who is the teachers who I know actively implements cultural competency and reading literature by Black authors. I read Toni Morrison, Ralph Ellison, Zora Neale Hurston, my first semester junior year of high school, and that was thanks to teachers like Miss Reed and so many other teachers like that in our district. And I really hope this paves the way for the proliferation of those methods of teaching in tandem with Dr. Clark's ABAR committee.
Thank you, Trustee Alice. All right, with that, we will put it to a vote. Trustee Alice.
Yes.
Trustee Nzewi.
Yes.
Trustee Mason.
Yes.
Trustee McFerrin.
Yes.
Trustee Mayo.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Motion passes 5-0 with concurrence from our student board member. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, presenters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have reports and information. 11.1, review the increase and decrease of classified personnel full-time equivalent for the 2020 and 2021 school year.
Yes, and I'll turn that over to Dr. Rubio.
Good evening, everyone. And somebody just texted me to let me know I'm currently serving as Jennifer Sachs, apparently by name. So I appreciate Jennifer for forwarding me the email link. Little did I realize that that would have greater implications. But if there's anyone I would love to live up to, it would be to be Jennifer. So nothing else is going on. You can still call me John, but I will proceed. This evening, I'm presenting to you our usual informational item, which is a review of our transactions out of the fiscal office in HR that shows the increase and decrease of positions or changes in budget codes. And thank you, Austin, for somebody who did that. I'm back. And our usual increases and decreases and changes in funding. So if there are any questions, please let me know.
Any questions, trustees? All right, hearing none. Thank you very much, Dr. Rubio. Item 11.2, this is the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, CCEE, presentation on systematic instructional review. Dr. Clark.
Yes, so CCEE is known throughout the state and actually throughout the nation. They are a very reputable organization, and they work with many school districts throughout California, really offering support and providing all sorts of technical assistance to districts so that they can meet the needs of all students and ensure that all students are learning at high levels. And so they're going to do a brief presentation tonight for the board and for the public. And so I am going to turn it over to Dr. Roberts. Can I start with Dr. Roberts, and then you can introduce your team? And I know you have a presentation, and the tech team will put that on the screen. So without any further ado, we have Dr. Roberts from CCEE.
Thank you, Superintendent Clark, President Cound, and members of the board. I'm Matthew Roberts, Director with California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. Very, very pleased to be with you and your stakeholders this evening. I'd like to represent and introduce my team, if I can, that's with us this evening. And starting from our Executive Director, Mr. Thomas Armellino, who will be co-presenting with me this evening. Dr. Carla Estrada, who is our Deputy Executive Director. Dr. Jenny Wright, who's our Senior Manager, and our Logistics Ace, who is handling a lot of the scheduling and such and running of our SIR process, which we'll get to in a minute. And last but not least, we have Dr. Craig Wheaton and Dr. Nick Mize, who are really our researchers, our folks that are on the ground conducting a lot of the focus groups and individual interviews and such. So we're very, very pleased with our team and be able to present with you this evening. I also am joined this evening too. We're very, very pleased to have our colleagues from Contra Costa County Office of Education, represented by Superintendent Lynn Mackey. Superintendent Mackey, very nice to see you. And Nick Zeffeld and Marcia Togayashi. So we're pleased to have our county office colleagues together, which is much in the spirit of our systemic instructional review process. And actually, you could advance the next slide if you want.
Dr. Roberts, if I could just jump in real quick.
Yes.
I was unaware that Mr. Armellino was going to be joining us this evening, and so I just want to officially welcome Mr. Armellino to the Mount Diablo Unified School District. It's been some time since I've seen him, but he's an amazing leader, and again, I have nothing but high praises for the work that he does and his leadership in this organization. So sorry about that, Dr. Roberts. I just really had to get that in.
No. And Mr. Armellino, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you for the next slide, if we can advance to the next one. Thank you, Superintendent Clark.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate those kind words, Dr. Clark. I had some kind words of my own for you as well. I want to first say good evening to the board and Madam President and the fellow trustees and Dr. Clark in particular. I'm very excited that you have Dr. Clark as your leader. We have some history together, and my experience with him in particular is his focus needs are focused always on what's good for kids. He's an equity leader, a real strong leader around curriculum instruction, which is our baby, right? And we often recognize, when folks are having struggles financially, it's curriculum instruction that often takes the back seat. So in particular, it's really why we exist in our new system of support. And so I want to share with you a little bit about kind of why we're here tonight, a little bit about the state system of support, and then I'll speak to some of the language specifically. But my main interest is really making sure that we're able to come alongside the district and continue to support the district, even though we have the specific role that we have to play. Our main role always is to advise and assist and be able to support school districts. We don't see ourselves as somebody who comes in, does a report, hands it to you and leaves. We really feel like we have some obligation and responsibility, right, to your students to be able to really help inform. We really see our job as kind of being your eyes and ears initially to give you kind of feedback and tell you what we see, both, as you'll learn a little bit, both with your strengths as well as some other areas to improve. And then, as I mentioned, continue to stay with you and do what we can to support you. So what I have here tonight is you can see our key roles in the state system of support. And specifically, our role is to partner with these local agencies to address chronic and complex instructional strategies. And we try to coordinate that individual support to make sure that it supports your LCAP. So we recognize too, that is your document, that is aligned with what it is that you need to do. So our goal is never to come in and give you an additional plan, right? It should support what you're already doing, as well as provide you some opportunity to give you some feedback as well. We really see this work, and what's unique about our title is we are the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. And so that is what drives our theory of action. We believe that we have to do our work by collaborating with others. And so in particular, we're working collectively with the county office as a partner. We have partners in the California Department of Education, as well as what the state refers to as our geo leads, which I won't go into too much in depth there too, but it's part of our system of support, which is just another resource that's available. And then specifically as we work with partners with the local education agency. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Superintendent Mackey.
I'll jump in. Good evening, Superintendent Clark and Board of Trustees. My name is Nicholas Ziefeld. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at the Contra Costa County Office of Education. Our agency partners with districts eligible for differentiated assistance, and this work is centered around understanding the system that's producing the outcomes that are showing up both in local data and the California dashboard. And then once we better understand the system, we support the running of thoughtful, measurable experiments to see if we can make changes that sustainably improve outcomes for students. On the screen, you're going to see a list of bullet points. These are our general steps that we use in differentiated assistance. With that said, we're eager to partner both with the district and the CCEE to ensure that our efforts, your efforts, and the support that CCEE provides are all aligned. Once CCEE systemic instructional review is completed, we look forward to supporting the implementation of the changes that you're interested in experimenting with. All of this is done in the name of improving student outcomes in a sustainable, measurable way. Next slide, please. So the general model for improvement that we work from is based upon these three questions. What are we trying to accomplish? How will we know that the change that we make will be an improvement? And finally, what change can we actually try to make that will result in an improvement? And once we have that idea for change that we believe will make an improved outcome, we run small agile experiments called a plan, do, study, act cycle to see if we can make improvements in measurable, sustainable ways before we attempt to spread and scale it to larger populations. Next slide, please. So I'll say it again, our team is ready and eager to support the work of Mount Diablo and CCEE in your improvement journey. We've deeply enjoyed working and learning alongside Mount Diablo district staff throughout the school year this year. I personally had the opportunity to attend a CCEE training series around accelerated learning with Ms. Sachs. We have Mount Diablo team members participating in our curriculum council and content area subcommittee meetings on a bi-monthly basis. We have curriculum and instruction coordinators working at Mount Diablo sites to grow instructional practice. Beyond the support that we are already providing on the screen, you can see a few of the areas that we can look forward to partnering with you this year and beyond. We appreciate being a partner in this process. We thank you for the time to share from our county standpoint, and I'll turn it back over to our colleagues at CCEE. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So what this speaks to is really, and I want to really take a few minutes really to kind of explain to the board a little bit as to why we're here. And so Mount Diablo was one of 4 districts in the state that were identified under a new section of the Ed Code under 52064.5, which is the school dashboard. And specifically, it identifies that if there's 3 or more pupil subgroups who are identified to section 52052, or if the school district has less than 3 pupil subgroups, if all of the school district's pupil subgroups in 3 out of 4 consecutive years are in red, that would qualify you under this 52052. So, and particularly what we do is we are really here to look pretty strong lens at those student groups, but we look at your district as a whole. And so part of our role, as I mentioned earlier, is to provide advice and assistance. And we do this through what we call our SIR, which is our systemic instructional review that you'll hear more about here in a bit. And we come alongside with the county office. And what we'll also do is, so we have kind of dual roles. We have this role that we always have to be able to support school districts. And it's really some of the work that we have done in the past, even with Adam and his prior district. His prior district did not qualify based on this ed code, but just as part of one of our other roles is that actually through Adam's leadership, he had asked for our support specifically, and we were able to come in because we have that ability if the district would like that service. In this role, we have to identify specifically what's happening with those 3 student groups and try to provide you feedback, right, as to tell you what we're seeing, right? And then we have some ideas as to how we can support you. So we have that first role of advising and assisting. We do that through our SIR support. And then we also have a role of continuing to progress monitor as the district starts to implement some of the strategies and things that have been defined. And so I want to kind of speak to that a little specifically too, and I'll share a little bit about what the ed code actually says. What the cool part about this is it's new, and so we kind of get to make it up. And so, and we have actually met with the state superintendent because as I mentioned, these are our first of our 4 districts, and the interest of the state superintendent and our interest is to be able to come in, as I mentioned, and identify what's happening, and then specifically continue to work with the district, progress monitor, because there is a role that we have to play in regards to seeing if you're actually being able to implement and being able to support the needs of these students. And then I'll speak to what happens as we move forward. So as I mentioned, we do that through what we call our systemic instructional review. And we do that in partnership with the county office as we complete the SIR. Then the goal then is to help inform the work of the county office as they do their differentiated assistance. And so we kind of collaborate and work together collectively so that the district isn't having to do something separate with the county office and separate with us. And again, trying to mesh that with what the priorities of the district already have in regards to their LCAP. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, right, the district, and you are well aware of this, right, has been in differentiated assistance for 2016-17, 2017-18. As we know, 18-19, we did not have data, right, and had that, but they were there in there prior as well. Here's your student groups that have been identified. So your African-American students, homeless youth, and foster youth, and you can see specifically in the areas that they were red. Next slide, please. So what I would share with you is I want to make sure part of my goal and part of my role is to make sure that I'm very clear with the board, right? Both on our theory of action, but also what the ed code says. And so I wanted to make sure that you folks are aware. So under 52072, this is the specific language that says the superintendent, that being the state superintendent, Tony Thurman, shall only intervene in a school district that meets both of the following criteria. So the school district meets the criteria under section 5207064.5, the 3 or more pupil subgroups, which I just explained that to you. So you meet that first piece of criteria. The second piece of criteria in that statute says the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence has provided advice and assistance to the school district and submits either of the following findings to the superintendent. So as I mentioned, the way that we initially provide advice and assistance is through the SIR. So you'll hear about the SIR tonight, right? A little bit as to how we're going to provide that initial advice and assistance. Then based on the work, right, we then have to make a determination: has the school failed or is unable to implement the recommendations, and that the inadequate performance of the school district based upon an evaluation rubric, which is the state dashboard, right, is either so persistent or acute as to require intervention by the superintendent. So this is the part that I was mentioning earlier. Since we're all new to this, we got to define how it is that we would make the decision to determine if you have failed or if you're unable to implement the recommendations. So one of the things that we were clear with when we met with the superintendent was none of us had an interest of us coming in, doing the SIR report, and then based on the SIR report, look at that information and say, wow, we don't think they're able to really implement these recommendations. That wouldn't be fair to you, right? And so part of our goal then is we submit that information to the board, to the superintendent, and then it really is your obligation for you to make the decision as to what it is that you feel based on that information you want to do with that information. How does it align with your goals? Right, and the ideas of what you already want to be able to do for your students. And then you have some obligation to then meet with us, and we have conversations around that and talk about what are your ideas and thoughts about how you want to move forward. Based on that conversation, we can continue to then jump back up into our role around advise and assist. So we can come alongside you, we can meet with the county office, we can even provide some resources and specific supports to engage in that work with you. And then on a quarterly basis, we have this obligation to be able to actually do a report. We'll make sure that you are aware of that report, and we report that back to the superintendent, basically saying, how are they doing? Are they making progress? At the same time, the school dashboard, right, will have continual data. As we know, it's very unlikely we'll have a dashboard next fall, right? We didn't have one this year too. So it's very unlikely that we'll be looking at that B. The goal of all of our work is to never get to A, right? I don't think we have, and so actually the goal of the state superintendent as well doesn't have any interest of wanting to come in and having to intervene. So our goal is for us all to kind of collaborate and work together, and with the hope of the SIR being a resource and a tool that you find helpful and gives you the feedback that that you may not normally get as you try to pursue this on your own. Next slide, please. Okay, and I believe, Matt, am I turning this back to you at this point? Matt, you're on mute.
No, this one's still yours.
Still me. Okay. So our continuum of support. Thank you. So it says this for school district, superintendent may. So I apologize. So in speaking to the superintendent, so if we got to a point where we had to make this decision and say, gosh, it doesn't look like they have the ability, right, to be able to meet the needs of these students and make progress, right? And we were then to turn you to the superintendent. The superintendent does have the ability, right? But he has to do this with the approval of the state board to do one or more of the following. He can make changes to your local control and accountability plan. He can develop and impose a budget revision in conjunction with revision to your local control and accountability plan. And the superintendent determines what allow the school district to improve the outcomes. He has the ability to stay or rescind an action as long as that action is not required and it doesn't oversee something that's already in the collective bargaining agreement. And in particular, focus around preventing the school district from improving the outcomes of pupil subgroups, as well as has the ability to appoint an academic trustee in the district to support the efforts to make sure that they support the superintendent's efforts working in the district. The superintendent has the responsibility to notify the local county superintendent, the county board of education, the superintendent of the school district, and of course the governing board of the school district of any of these actions, as I mentioned here, 1 through 4 that he may choose to do. And then also has to have the state board's approval in order to direct him to exercise any of those powers. So I share that with you just so that you're clear on how all of this works, what's in statute. As I mentioned, we're most interested in the theory of action piece. And what I can tell you from working with Superintendent Clark in the past is he's a very collaborative man. He really sees the importance of kind of working together. So we're in here for the long haul with you folks, right? So, and we're excited about that opportunity and appreciate the opportunity to be able to meet with you tonight. And we'll answer some questions at the end of the presentation. And now I will turn it back to Dr. Matthew Roberts.
Thank you, Executive Director Armelino. And I will take it from there if we can advance to the next slide. So let's talk about what we're doing now. And this is the second phase of our process, really. And that's the systemic instructional review process. This is otherwise known as the SIR process. And it's really a process that's designed to come in and assess instructional practices. And these 12 elements, instructional elements that you have listed here. And what we do is we do it through an individualized approach. We collect data. We go out and we do interviews, individual interviews, as well as focus groups. We triangulate the data with other artifacts that might emerge in the district as well. And so we look at really from each one of these 12 sort of elements, sort of a SWOT analysis, which is basically what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats in each of these 12 components. And there's an analysis that's done based on all of this sort of inquiry that we're currently going through now. I have to say, thank you very much to the district, to Jennifer Sachs, to Superintendent Clark, to our board members, to your board members, our board members, I guess I could say collectively, for all of your assistance, access to stakeholders, the district and such. And so we're well underway to sort of come up with these findings, if you will, or these action steps or recommendations in conjunction with you. So let's go on to the next slide. So these are the possible data gathering methods that we use. We always triangulate. We go after at least 3 different types of sources before we cite things or facts within the report itself. And so it really, you can look at this report, the SIR report, as sort of a checkup. It's a way to look at your instructional practices throughout the district and really look at systems that sort of support that. And the beauty of it is that as we do that, the partners that are currently in the room with the county office and CCE and lots of other folks that are stakeholders can help sort of implement those things. And so that's overall the process. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So it's important, I think, to note, this is one of my favorite slides because too often in education, we don't work from an asset-based approach. And so with the SIR process, we do. We want to work with, as Executive Director Armellino talked about, the current things that are working well in the district, your current visions, your current goals, the LCAP, et cetera. The district has a great deal of diversity that is a strength that we see emerging. And so really looking at those bright spots, previous work that's been done, again, with the prior knowledge of the board, as well as Superintendent Clark and his staff, all of the site principals and teachers and support staff and such. So anyway, really looking at those assets. So hopefully I hit that too overly hard. The next one is just the comprehensive SWOT, as I talked about. Actually, go back, sorry. So the comprehensive SWOT, which is looking at each of the elements so that you know it's a fairly objective process. The third one is engagement with LEAs and COE for feedback. So we really want to build partnerships. And so we're very, very pleased to be here to do that. And then again, based on the SIR report, we develop and co-develop, I would say, an action plan that corresponds to your current trajectory that you're on. But in looking at the 3 student groups especially, and in looking at the performance of students and in trying to provide the types of outcomes along with you that really moves your students forward. Now, if you would please move to the next slide. So we want to give you an idea of general timelines. We're almost midway through the SIR process. Next week will be the midpoint for us. So we're really in that listen and learn sort of period, data gathering and analysis. The report itself, we have a first draft that will work with both the county office and the district and share with you a first draft around March 1st. The second draft will be March 18th. And then the final report will be around March 31st. So pretty quick timeline in terms of report production, analysis of data. And then from there, we go on to the multi-agency meetings that, in working with the district and partnering with you around those action steps to make sure that they are moving forward. And so trying to do that multi-agency coordination to sort of help with that process too. Anyway, we're really excited to be working with you. I'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. This is a really good slide too. So your role as a board, you play such a critical role. I know you know that, and we want to really exemplify you for that. As we progress into the SIR process, we really think that there are a few ways, among others, that the board can be supportive and helpful in this. And the first is that you participated as an interviewee in the SIR interviews. So we really, really thank you for that. Thank you. The voice throughout the district is so important in this process. Approving an LCAP and really making sure your resources are prioritized and connected to connecting those district resources to really those areas of student need. And then lastly, just being a champion like board members are so great at doing to support the SIR actions recommendations for systemic change and really the partnerships that we're trying to develop within your community. Next one. So this is where we get to questions. Let's see if you have any. Hopefully we've given you a good snapshot of what we're doing and what we hope to sort of produce and work along with you. So I'll open it up for Superintendent Clark and Board President.
All right, thank you so much for that valuable presentation. Really glad that we can be partnering with you and that this is a resource that the state makes available to us. I know it's so important for high performing boards, school boards, to have a focus on student learning and achievement. And I think that this partnership will really help us to gain that focus and make those action plans in the areas that we need to. So I'm very excited about the partnership and the information that you'll be sharing with us. So with that, other trustees, do people have questions or comments? Oh, was that Trustee Nzewi? I think you're muted.
You can't
There
hear
you
me?
go. I can hear you now.
I'm like, I did nothing.
You're back. Go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious at that, as you've conducted, I know that you've conducted a lot of focus groups, at least with district-sponsored committees and parent groups, and that the 3 subgroups that qualify us for taking these measures is Black students experiencing homelessness, and children who are currently in foster care. And I'm wondering how intentional you've been in engaging the adults who care for these subgroups in these committees, because I don't know that they're necessarily represented in the district-sponsored groups.
Oh, I muted when I meant to unmute. So to answer your question, yes, engaging with all aspects of the district are very important to us in order to allow the right data to emerge. And some of this is a process of knowing who to talk to next, and some of this is as we get out into visiting school sites virtually, and in visiting classrooms, and in talking to folks around the district, like your social workers, like parents. So we get glimpses of who we need to talk to, and then we usually go back to Dr. Clark and his staff, or in working with other staff members, and sort of begin to schedule time for folks to come in for interviews. We operate under trying to get the data to speak the same language. In other words, saturation of the categories and such. So we work at that. So we'll continue to sort of drill down to look at the representative stakeholders that can reveal. And we have a lot of questions still. And I think it's those questions that sort of guide us in those directions as well. We're always open to suggestions as well. If folks, and usually during interview processes, we ask those questions, are there other folks that we can talk to about this? So I think it's to shine a light. Think of the process as to shine a light on those subgroups, but not only those subgroups, but all student groups, because it's not only those 3, we're also interested in all the other students as well. So hopefully that kind of gives you a glimpse. We're still in the middle of the process though.
I think that's such a good point, Trustee Nzewi, that oftentimes the way that a school district or entity works is, you have certain committees, and there's people that are able to access those committees due to their work schedule or, time availability and that sort of thing. But that doesn't reach everybody. So I think it's a very, very good question to figure out, are we reaching the actual, are we, in addition to all of the focus groups that you all have had so far, are we reaching the students, the actual students that we're talking about here, and hearing their voices, their perspective, as well as their families? So I would hope that with Dr. Clark and other trustee ideas about how to reach those people to make sure that their voices are heard. Thank you so much for that point.
Yeah, and I think just to respond to that too, just to be straightforward, tell us who they are, right? Let us know who they are, right? So we don't know your local community, right? So that we are relying on you, right, to be able to help us with that too, as well as the county office. So if you want to make sure that we're talking with specific folks, please let us know who they are. So we want to make sure that we have as much information as possible, right, that we can, so that the whole goal of this, right, is to have as much information to really determine what's going on, right, what's happening, right, and why are we not meeting the needs of those students, and what can we do differently? So please help us with that.
I'll be happy to help. And at the same time, it is a little frustrating and disappointing that the district wouldn't be able to, that we as a district wouldn't be able to identify those particular adults and families. The other question I'd have is, will in the report that's forthcoming, will there be the data on the demographics of the parents or stakeholders in general? I know it's not just parents. The stakeholders that were that provided input?
There will be a general overview of the district demographics and the student groups that we're talking about. I mean, the languages alone that are represented within the district are a lot. We don't, though, because of confidentiality in the research process, we don't call out individuals. We let the theme or the factual pieces sort of emerge, and then we deal with it from there. But knowing the landscape in the organization and sort of, we need to make sure that we're talking to the right people. So thank you for the questions.
Thank you. Other questions, concerns? Trustee Mason?
I would just say that I'm a big fan of collaboration. I've been involved in county collaborations and some state collaborations that ended up in resulting in things that when we started out, we didn't even think were possible. But when you get a lot of different people with a lot of different viewpoints in the room, it's amazing the difference you can make. So I'm really excited to have an outside set of eyes looking at this program with us. So I think we can do really, really good work here.
Thank you, Trustee Mason. Other comments? Trustee Alas?
Yeah, I wanted to say that thank you so much for the presentation and the report. And then as we're in the next coming months developing the LCAP for our district, it is imperative that we are intentional about involving students from different demographics in that conversation, and not just simply through issuing out some sort of survey that gets response only from the students who have access to that survey, but actually involving students in the room where it happens. So that would be getting consultation from demographics who are potentially struggling with school and vulnerable groups that were highlighted in the presentation and that have been highlighted, statewide, and as groups that we need to look out for. So, English language learners, students who suffer from chronic absenteeism, students of color, all those very relevant groups, and being intentional about seeking out those students as we're reviewing the LCAP. So that's my contribution. I'm totally going to be working on making sure that student voice is at the forefront of those conversations as we move forward in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Trustee Ellis. Trustee Mayo, it looked like you had a comment before. There we go.
I just wanted to say I appreciate the comment that you made that the findings and the changes that the district will make, and we will say will make, will benefit more than just these three groups of students, because we know that there are different talents among each of our students, and oftentimes the benefits of working with one student also will benefit the second student. So I find the intense value that is important across the entire district. So I look forward to that piece of it as well.
Thank you, Trustee Mayo. Yes, as we look at the priority areas criteria that brought us to this place, I noticed that across the board, whether it's African-American students, homeless youth, foster youth, all three of them have school climate as one of the issues. And certainly if we can improve school climate overall, that will absolutely affect all students and improve things for all students. So yes. Trustee McFerrin, did you have any comments or questions? Okay. All right. Anything else? Thank you very much. We look forward to continuing to work with you and to see the progress as it moves along.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move on to 11.3, key state and federal budget fiscal issues. Dr. Clark.
Yeah, so I want to introduce someone else who is just well known throughout the state and nationally. And I actually, as I'm participating in the superintendent symposium this week, I was able to hear Kevin earlier today, talking to hundreds of superintendents throughout the state and taking questions and just really giving us a good snapshot of what's going on financially at the state and with the legislators. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Kevin Gordon from Capital Advisors. Many of you know him, but I think he has some valuable information that can really help our district, and looking forward to keeping this conversation going. So without any further ado, Mr. Gordon.
Great. It's good to be with you. And I don't know if you got my name successfully changed.
Yeah, you were Dr. Gonzalez there, or Dr. Lisa Gonzalez.
I know, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, because usually it has my kid's name on here. But anyway, it's good to be with you, superintendent, members of the board. Yeah, one of the things that, we do interact with a number of superintendents and CBOs, and both these leaders on your team are folks that I'm very familiar with. And we've had conversations about my absolute happiness to come and convey to the board kind of some of the issues that are going on in the budget that actually have an impact on Mount Diablo in particular. And we thought we'd go ahead and take the opportunity to give you guys your own briefing. So, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to leave some time for some questions. But really, we've zeroed in on a couple of key issues. And I did send over some PowerPoint slides. We don't need to.
Yeah, we have a presentation there.
That's great.
Yeah.
Let's just go to that first slide there. There's just 2 slides that encapsulate the key issues. There's a lot written and a lot of people talking about what's in the state budget and what's at stake at the federal level. What I've done to try to help you guys really focus on this is kind of cut to the chase. Yeah, it is arguably a much better budget than what we were facing last year. Remember, in May, the governor was proposing the deepest cuts to public education in state history. And I know that you guys were reeling about how on earth were you guys going to tackle some of the burdens that were looking like they were headed our way. You might remember that you were asked to queue up budgets of different depths of cuts. Once again, you get elected to try to make a difference for kids. And essentially what they were handing you was the obligation to dismantle really crucial things that make a difference for kids. And especially at a time when obviously you're looking for as much help as you can get, just like, Tom and his crew at CCE, you guys are obviously collaborating to do some really important work. So what has happened now is our friends in Sacramento gleefully take credit for this huge increase in the budget from what was enacted in the budget till now. And, totally respect the challenge that they were with, but when you have folks in Sacramento bragging about a $15 billion increase to investment in education, when what really was going on here was a profoundly mistaken economic forecast. And like it or not, we have a tax structure that is disproportionately focused. It's a very progressive tax structure focused on very rich people. We've always known that. So when the revenue, they had to guess on revenue figures last May. And remember, they delayed when we were going to collect income tax info. Your taxes didn't have to be filed till the summer. So when they were putting the budget together, they completely guessed. And they were guessing it was going to be awful. And what they forgot was this trajectory that we've seen, that California general fund revenue are driven by very rich people. And it's that upper end of what we call a K-shaped recovery. The folks at the bottom end of the economic spectrum are hurting desperately, worse than the Great Recession. Sort of almost feels like Depression era challenges that we face with families and kids that are at the lower end of the economic spectrum. But it's the higher end of that K-shaped recovery that's driving the general fund so that we're in a better position economically with revenues to the state than we were pre-COVID. We're doing better than the year before there was COVID. So it tells you where the revenues are at. So it means that they didn't need to do deferrals. They didn't need to make any cuts. They didn't need to do a whole lot of things. And so that helps me to focus you on the key parts of this budget where there's the appearance of a lot of money, and all it really is, they're not breaking any big records. It's just giving us, when you really sort everything out, that year over year growth that we were on a trajectory to get anyway, had there not been COVID. And let me show you that in this next slide. So, and what we've, working with the assistant superintendent for business with Lisa Gonzalez, we wanted to make sure that we were focused on some things as I presented her with all the data and the information that gave a fair picture of what's going on with the money. So if you take a look at it, probably one of the first issues that's really important for us is the COLA issue. So let's just say that we weren't in a profoundly bad economic forecast, but they'd actually called it what it has turned out to be, the revenue that we actually expect to have happen. Do you think they would have given us or maintained the idea of a zero COLA for the current year? Of course not. So what the governor does is fairly builds in a COLA for the year we're in the middle of. He applies the formula of what would be the COLA, and he gets the number that they're using. And then when you set that, you apply that COLA to this year, and then you apply it next year's COLA, you get a compounded COLA of 3.84%. It looks like a really big number, but you got to remember that it's 2 different years. But here's the major problem with the COLA. The governor only proposes it on the local control funding formula, but not many other programs at all. So special ed, for example, and you guys know the amount of money that you're spending on special ed. The idea in special ed and across all your categorical programs, you're only getting the 1.5, not the 3.84. Think about the implications of that with our labor partners. What are they going to want? They're going to want the 3.84, of course, but you're not getting money across the board. And when we pay our people, we don't pay them based on, are you in special ed or not? We're going to give you less. We negotiate contracts that pay all our people. So you are going to be at a disadvantage, and calibrating what that dollar amount really means is important. So what we got to do is obviously we got to be, letting Senator Glazer and our legislative delegation know this issue is a priority to fix. It's one thing to say the budget's better and we all should just be very happy, but there are some problems with this that got to get addressed, or it's going to put the district in a very awkward situation. So working on that COLA so that it's applied across the rest of the categorical programs, particularly special ed, is going to be really important. The second bullet is about deferrals, and you guys have all gotten used to now what deferrals really are, which is the state promising to pay you someday, but in the interim, just go borrow the money. Can you imagine someone coming to you saying that? Oh, by the way, I really will pay you someday. Can you go borrow the money in the intervening time and just act like there's no cuts? Well, so we've been through this a few times with the state before. If we have an economy and a revenue situation that is what it is, the first thing the governor should have done is back off all the deferrals. He's actually implementing the deferrals with the idea of paying them off in each of the fiscal years. The end of this fiscal year, he'll pay for it at the beginning of the next fiscal year in order to achieve that budget savings. That's the way he handles it. But note that in the blue there, 3.7 billion is what is a balance remaining because he doesn't pay them all off. So in a year when we have this unprecedented availability of one-time money, what does it take to deal with deferral money? One-time money. He should be paying attention to these fundamental budget issues first before he comes up with ideas on how he wants to spend extra money that he's throwing around to school districts in the form of some of these additional programs that he's created. It's really crazy when you look at his overall budget. It's $19.1 billion of new revenue and only it's less than $3 billion of ongoing funding. It basically pays for that COLA you have there and a couple of other things. But he leaves unaddressed $3.7 billion of deferrals. We need to press on the legislature and the administration to get this right, either at the May revise or when the budget is done, or it will be an expense that haunts us in the future. The state Department of Finance and the nonpartisan legislative analyst has said that in 2022-23, the state starts having structural budget imbalances. So we don't get this paid now when we have the money, and we wait, and they have an inability to actually give us the dough. Don't think that the people that you guys do your trans with, or the borrowing that you do, the short-term borrowing, are not going to want you ultimately to settle up on those obligations. That's why we've got to fight and make sure that these deferrals get paid off. And then there's the incentive for in-person instruction. It's this $2 billion plan, which, you know, I've been a bit critical of, because number one, he uses $2 billion of Prop 98 money. We don't think there's enough money in the $2 billion just to pay for the COVID tests alone. And because they are health-oriented costs, we think that ought to be paid not out of Prop 98 money, but out of health money, or out of what will be buckets of money coming from the Biden administration. Think about it this way. And again, you know, this governor is certainly close and has a relationship with the new administration, that you propose a budget that has $2 billion of money for teaching and learning to be spent on COVID testing. And the president during the campaign has said, and he's stuck by it, he intends to open schools in his first 100 days. That means he's going to spend a lot of money on it. Why would we spend money out of Prop 98 when we know there's the one-time dollars coming from Washington, D.C., particularly now we know? The president has called for $350 billion for state and local governments to use for this. Under the prior plan that was passed, or the highest dollar amount proposal that was in Congress being considered, when Pelosi and Democrats had their proposal, they were proposing $160 billion for local governments. The president's plan is $350 billion. So assuming that he has to negotiate with somebody and he only gets half a loaf, there's going to be plenty of money for the governor to use when he gets his share, roughly 10% of whatever we end up getting, to help pay for this. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, but not just yet. I want to talk a little bit about, so there's that has got a lot of controversy with it. The rules are constantly changing. I'm not sure what you guys as a district have decided to do on this. My advice is be careful what you wish for. If you get in line for this money, I believe you will have far more costs than they are going to be able to provide you in terms of monetary backfill. Now, again, if you got in line for it and then that extra money comes through, maybe it all works out, but it's a gamble that you would be having to take. And then the rules, I think, are going to change. The governor had a meeting yesterday morning with a group of superintendents and talked about maybe relaxing some of the cadence on the testing. That would obviously make the numbers pencil a little bit better if he really does do that. So that's not all done yet. So that next one is the Learning Loss Mitigation Fund. Again, $4.6 billion again of Prop 98 one-time money. This pot of money I kind of like because it's very flexible in how it's used, and it's going to give you, the board, a lot of discretion about what models of expanded learning, whether it's summer, longer day, longer year, different models of approaches to dealing with the learning loss gap that we're having to address. So as long as it's pretty flexible, gives a lot of local discretion, that those kind of resources are important. There are some people that are critical of this pot because if they didn't earmark it and send it to you this way categorized, it would actually come to you anyway. The difference is no strings attached. The difference is that when it comes to you for a purpose like this, what we call, and some of you have been around a little longer than others relative to seeing these budgets, categorical programs. And categorical programs like this are generally off the table. So that means it's dedicated to solving this problem, not necessarily to land where most Prop 98 dollars do, which is right in the middle of the bargaining table. Now, that said, you're going to want to use this. You're going to do summer programs. You're going to do extended learning. That's about paying teachers and about paying classified staff. You're going to be giving this to staff anyway. So there's plenty to be in the mix as you go to the table to work with your unions on how you would approach that money. I think it's a good idea the way it's presented. But again, we've typically, I used to be the lobbyist for the School Board Association. We always said, send it all to us for local control. So you might have a little different take on that. And then finally, the supplemental payments issue I wanted to tell you about. CSBA has worked really hard over the last couple of years to focus on the issue of fair and full funding. You're probably familiar with. In that campaign, guess what the legislature and the governor have done since that campaign was launched? It was launched when Jerry Brown was governor. Up until last summer's budget, they'd done nothing to do anything about the base of school funding in California, except they did this, and it was big. Supplemental payments was a commitment by the governor. And it wasn't just in the context of the budget crisis we were facing. He said, our funding in California in terms of base funding needs to be adjusted upward. We got to make a commitment. So he promised a budget that would give us 1.5% of the state's general fund on top of the Prop 98 guarantee, fold that in every year till we got to 12.5 billion, and up the base funding guarantee for schools from 38% of the general fund to 40% of the general fund in that time. In this budget that he just introduced, he walks that back. It was actually passed in law. It is actually the law. So when the governor 2 weeks ago proposed that we not do it, he actually has to propose the repeal of a law he helped get passed. We ought to be fighting about that. And what he's hoping is the distraction over, we're doing better than we thought we were last summer, and I'm giving you more money than you've ever gotten before, and all these other things, that we won't focus on this issue. And we have to focus on this issue because it's the only thing that we've gotten that's meaningful to address base funding. And it will have absolute implications for Mount Diablo. So I just wanted to lay out these issues. These are the key state issues. And then I'm going to touch a little bit on federal issues. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The one thing I mentioned there about allocation approach was that we all have to be really cognizant of the fact that while you guys do get Title I money, and clearly, you have a share of supplemental grant money, that you're not in the concentration grant formula deep enough so that you are big winners under these approaches to fund districts that disproportionately only is calibrated to kids in poverty. Is that you guys know firsthand, all of our kids are having needs right now. All of our kids are. LCFF's lean or tilt toward kids in poverty is a good thing. But creating other formulas that so that at the end of the day, you look at all the pots of money and none of them are sent out so that it increases the base. It only goes for our kids predicated on poverty or some of the indexes that drive some of these pots of money, can be a bad thing. And we need to pay attention to make sure that they set aside some other funds somewhere to balance the disproportionate nature of the money that's going out in some of these formulas that are being created. And I'll start and I'll talk a little bit about funding. I think maybe I should stop there for a quick second and see if you guys have questions about any of the state stuff I talked about.
Yeah, I think that's what I was just going to suggest, that we pause for questions.
Yeah.
I can't see everyone on the screen right now, so just unmute yourself if you have a question and jump in.
I'm just wondering when we know something. Right now, it's all speculation. It's sitting with the legislation. When will we actually have some real numbers?
Right. So when we really get more information and it really gels fast, will be at what we call the May revision. And this year, we're not going to be delaying tax filing time. So April 15th, we'll file our taxes. They're going to be slicing open envelopes and they will have probably a very accurate May. In fact, I think there's a chance the May revision will be bigger than this January budget forecast. And again, it's for the reasons I've talked about. As long as we see a stock market that continues to behave the way it has, and I'm not sure there's any big reason why it wouldn't, we could end up with even bigger numbers than we have now. And again, the thing that's really important to note is bigger numbers doesn't mean everybody's a wash in dough and you're just fine, thank you very much. It means there's an opportunity to fix some of these systemic problems that they're not doing right by our budget right now. And maybe that'll be the solution to some of these key problems. Great question, though.
Other questions?
I appreciate the comment. This is Linda Mayo. I appreciate the comment about the deferrals and that those are going to continue forward. What upsets me the most, and perhaps you can address it a little bit more, Mr. Gordon, is the fact that we have to take out trans. There is no early prepayment, so we are stuck with the interest debt regardless of what happens with the budget.
Right. Such a great point is that when in November, the nonpartisan legislative analysts said, hey, there's big money headed your way, and the first thing we ought to do is roll back the implementation of the deferrals to try to alleviate the cost of borrowing and all those other implications that you have to jump through. They're doing that at a time when the governor doesn't really have any control, right? He has to wait till January. Well, by the time he introduces his budget in January, I think the reason why he decided not to try to roll back the deferrals before they're ever implemented is because of what you're saying, is that the cost of money is low, and you would have had the cost of borrowing, the borrowing cost no matter what. So, and then the other thing is that the other little trick to this for the governor is by actually implementing the deferrals and paying them off at the end of the fiscal year and out of funds out of the next fiscal year, making that whole transaction actually occur, but retiring most of it. He actually creates a little bit of cushion in case something went dramatically wrong. I mean, as much as we have things go dramatically right and we didn't expect it, the opposite can happen, and COVID's a great example of it. So he gives himself a little bit of insurance on our dime. And it's not comforting to know that they move forward or they continue that $3.7 billion balance at the cost of LEAs when everything's supposed to be now okay. It doesn't really feel like it when he keeps this stuff, but good question.
Yeah, I had a similar question around the deferrals. If you know, it seems like the smart thing to do would have been to remove the deferrals before we had to enter into the agreement, which could have still happened in the beginning of January. But now if we are advocating for them to still pay it off this year, but we don't find out until May, I mean, we've already committed to it in January. So
yeah,
is there a point to even advocating to remove this year's deferrals?
And it's not really part of what I've been saying, only because, again, it's almost, you know, inescapable, the cost of borrowing and what you did do. And it was probably a prudent measure to get into given what we were faced with. So it's just about timing. But the advocacy should be around saying this $3.7 billion balance is a bunch of baloney. And there's no reason the state should make us carry, because you guys will carry your share of that money. And you will have money deferred next year again that you're going to have to cover until they pay it off. And that's not good.
And then when they pay it off, can they pay it off to us, including our costs?
I mean, that's a reasonable ask, is that we would have never done this if they hadn't had what I call a profoundly wrong economic forecast. Those are costs we all had to bear in school districts. It would be really awesome because guess what? I mean, it's a really great point you're making. That is out of general fund monies. That's out of discretionary money that you could be using for other kinds of purposes. Absolutely. I think it's a reasonable thing to say the state should find some way to make sure that we are made whole for that.
My concern is that they won't pay back all of the deferral. They'll find a way to say, sorry, Charlie, you only get part of it.
Right. And I think that is a very real possibility. If they don't retire it soon, they get themselves into a situation where they do have these structural deficits, which both, as I mentioned, the LAO and Department of Finance are both projecting as early as 22, 23. We got to get this done. By the way, I'll just tell you, I've talked to the new budget subcommittee chairman, John Laird, who some of you might remember that name. He was in the assembly. He was chair of the budget committee several years. He took, he was out of the legislature for a while. He just came back in a Senate seat on the Central Coast. And of course, he knows everything about the budget because he used to chair it. And we got really lucky. It turns out he's now going to be the chairman of the Education Budget Subcommittee in the Senate. And we've had this conversation. He totally gets it. I think we've got a reasonably good chance that the legislature is not going to put up with this. And they're going to say, let's pay our debts first before we create a $4.6 billion program for learning loss. We got to stabilize our base first, the fundamentals of school finance. And then let's see what we have to spend on some of these other programs. And frankly, let's leverage more of this federal money. There's plenty of it. So.
Other questions?
This is Keisha.
Yes.
I just wanted, you answered the question in Trustee Mason's question. Actually, not the point I wanted to make is because people don't realize that this is the governor's proposal that he has to make every year in January. And the rubber hits the road in May, between May and June, when the governor and the legislature has to negotiate. And then the second you just answered with Trustee Mayo was, what is your take? I've listened to some of the hearings and I don't feel like the legislature is really going for this part of the governor's budget. And so I was just going to ask, what is your take from the legislature, or how about the assembly side you didn't speak on?
Yeah, no, both houses are there. And I had a little conversation just today with the chairman of the Education Committee, Patrick O'Donnell, and we were both chatting a little bit about, I thought it was funny, you'll want to use this line. He goes, one of the things that everybody says we ought to be doing is practicing policy based on good science. And he said, our problem is we've got the epidemiological science, and then we got this thing called political science. And unfortunately, it's the political science that's winning out. So the governor's gotten pretty clobbered by the legislature, who have kind of, unearthed what they think are the shortcomings of the proposal. I mean, think about it this way. If you did a rigorous testing regimen that is so expensive because it was a demand of our friends in the teachers unions, and I totally understand why they want that, but you did it at their behest, and you spend all the money and you make all the effort and you create all these rules, and you never did get them to endorse it. They're not on board. It's like, why would you announce something when it has the support of nobody? And it's just got all kinds of logistical problems. So it's like, you get their support and they want to return to school. Show me that package and let's see what that looks like. Because the goal here is to reopen safely and to have our staff be willing to come back.
I just have one other quick thing. Was you were talking about the COLA and how it doesn't cover categorical programs. It's only one piece of the budget. Isn't that something we face every year, that the general public looks at the COLA and our employees say, just pass it on down, whatever percent the COLA is, that should be the percent raise that we agree to. But I've never seen it work that way, because it doesn't cover, it never covers everything in the budget. And so we're not able to explain it very clearly to the public how that COLA does not apply to all staff.
It is true that we have gotten split COLAs before, and there are always a certain number of categoricals that actually don't get it. And that's wrong and bad. And I don't think it's, I think that they ought to do something different. However, in probably at least 10 categorical programs almost, they are typically slated to get the COLA. And they're the biggies like special ed, and it ought to be there. So yeah, we do have that problem to some extent almost every year. It's a fight worth fighting. And many times we win it. We won it the year before last. The legislature came back and said, come on, we got to give COLA to these other programs. And they did. I am very optimistic about this as well. Senator Laird seems to be on our side regarding the way this COLA gets applied. I'm sure Kevin McCarty is going to be in the same place. He's the Assembly Budget Sub-Chair. We're going to work on him as well.
All right, thank you. Shall we move on? Anyone else? All right.
Yeah, and I realize you guys, boards should not have to spend this much time on this stuff. So very quickly, I'll just tell you, this is an outline of the money that we just got in December. And again, to put it in context, so there's that $6.7 billion figure under ESSER. That's for K-12. And the one thing I wanted to warn you guys about in particular is that when we got money, we got $6.8 billion last spring, and you guys got money out of that. And it was probably a pretty impressive amount of money in total. But when you got the money last spring, you guys got the money out of 4 different pots. And you might remember one of the pots distributed a lot of money based on your special ed population. One of the pots distributed money based on LCFF. Another pot distributed money based on the number of kids you have in supplemental and concentration grants. And the final pot distributed it based on Title I kids. This pot of money this time around, and of course that old one was 6.8 billion. This 6.7 gets distributed exclusively on Title I. You guys will get less money than you got before. So it's really important for our community and our friends in labor and other people to know that there is this number that looks similar, but our share of it is not going to be as much this time around. And we got to be cognizant of that. Obviously, we want as much as we can, but going into it knowing everyone's saying that you guys are rolling in dough, and you're going to say, you know what? It's actually not as much as we got last spring. The other little headline that doesn't help us is that a bunch of, Ed Week and a bunch of publication, even EdSource did this, and I told John Fensterwald about this. They all reported that you're getting 4 times more money than you got last spring. That's 4 times more than what the ESSER program went. Only one pot. You got 4 pots last spring. The smallest, one of the smallest pots was a program called ESSER. And this Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Act, this pot I'm showing you now is number 2. It's ESSER number 2. So it's important to know that that pot is 4 times bigger than the small pot, but it's not total more money than you got last spring. 6.7 billion this time. It was 6.8 last time. The state's not even getting 4 times the amount of money. It's all about distribution, and we have to watch that carefully as a district. Then there's the GEAR money. This is money that the governor has a lot of discretion over, except that a big chunk of it, we'll get about $400 million. It's like $380 million. 187 million of it goes to private schools that are serving kids in poverty. So Catholic schools and other schools that have, numbers of kids that are in poverty are going to get that money. So there'll be about $130 million or so that the state actually has left over to distribute to anything from pre-K all the way to higher ed. So the question is, how much might the governor give us? He has not decided yet. So he has to. In fact, the other thing that we just found out today, the governor's actually thinking about not applying for the money, which is totally nonsensical. And it's because, I don't know, someone's putting pressure on him about, don't go after money that just goes to private schools. Well, a whole bunch of money comes to public schools. So that would be like cutting off your nose to spite your face. And any money California can get for free that serves the interest of kids, especially kids in poverty, it just makes no sense at all that he's thinking about not applying. But that's out there. And then the president's stimulus package, I talked a little bit about the second bullet there, the money for state and local government. The first bullet is the money for schools. $130 billion is the proposal for K-12, $13 billion for California. And what we're really hoping is that Linda Darling-Hammond, who is the president of the state board and the governor's chief education advisor, happens to be the chief education advisor to the transition team, the Biden camp, that they don't just send this out on Title I, but they actually give the state the latitude to distribute it in a way that all districts get to benefit somehow. And there can be a focus on kids in poverty, but for goodness sakes, make sure that money of that magnitude actually really benefits all kids. And that'll help you guys out. So that is it. You got the show and tell for today. And again, we want to try to do what we can to try to help, illuminate some of the numbers for the board. Whenever you guys are interested in having me, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Gordon. That was very informational, I think, not only for us as board members and the decisions we need to make, but for the public as well, to understand how the system works and where exactly we are in it at the moment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gordon.
Good to be with you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Okay, so we'll move on to 12.0 board member reports. Let's see, who would like to go first? Trustee Mayo, would you like to begin?
I'm the first victim. So welcome, everybody. It's good to see your faces again, even if it is on a Zoom call. I'd like to share that one of the events I attended in the last 2 weeks was the MDUSD Education Foundation meeting on Monday. And on February 1st, we're launching our Give 10 campaign, where folks will be asked to give $10. It's a very nominal amount, or give 10 minutes of your time to promote the Education Foundation and its work on social media. We believe this will have a great impact with our community, raise some funds, which we need to support programs within the district, and it will benefit for everyone with the positive news that folks will learn about in the programs that are happening within our schools. So it has a multiple prong approach. I would like to share 2 legislation advocacy events that are going to be held by PTA. The first is the California State PTA Virtual Legislation Conference, which will be held February 8th and 9th. And the second is the National PTA Virtual Legislation Conference, March 9th and 10th. Both are amazing. And in particular, if you're interested in the national one, I would suggest you sign up. Mr. Kevin Gordon will be a presenter at the California one. So he's always fun and entertaining and answers a lot of questions from individuals throughout California. So it's at these conferences we learn where we have common situations and where we can have different situations, and we can better advocate with our legislators. So I think they're very valuable and recommend them highly. The Business Education Alliance meeting will be held on Monday, February 1st at 4 to 6 p.m. via Zoom. And this is the collaboration between the Mount Diablo School District and industry partners. And where they will be talking about looking at the industry sector maps and getting input from the partners about anything that should be added. The public is welcome to attend these. So if you just do a Google search on the Mount Diablo webpage, you'll be able to find the Zoom link and sign up. And then I would like to promote the Contra Costa Science and Engineering Fair. March 12th is the day of the judging for students. I am the judge recruiter. I'm looking for 140 adults who love science and who love to work with students and appreciate the work that students do. The judges would be involved between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. We believe that there are going to be over 200 projects, so I need at least 140 judges. And the science fair is open, of course, as I've said before, to students grades 7 through 12. It will be held virtually. And I would like to share that you don't have to have a lot of scientific experience, just be able to understand the scientific theory and the work that students should be engaged in while they are conducting their experience. Our returning judges value the day in working with each other and finding out what's new in science, and they appreciate the engagement that the students use with their students and in speaking with the adults. So it's a very rewarding day. If you're interested in signing up, just type in Contra Costa or CC Science Fair, and it will come up in your browser, and you can click on the Contra Costa County Science and Engineering Fair and go directly to the link to sign up. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Mayo. Trustee Nzeri.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. To quote the previously mentioned Nina Simone, it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life, and I'm actually feeling really good. 1 week into a new presidential administration, we already have a national response to this pandemic for public education. On his second day, President Biden issued an executive order on supporting the reopening and continuing operation of schools and early childhood providers. So indulge me for a moment while I share a few sections of this order that makes me excited and relieved for education. So the executive order states that the Secretary of Education shall, consistent with applicable law, provide in consultation with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, evidence-based guidance to assist states and elementary and secondary schools in deciding whether and how to reopen and how to remain open for in-person learning, and in safely conducting in-person learning, including by implementing mitigation measures such as cleaning, masking, proper ventilation, and testing. Provide advice to state, local, tribal, and territorial educational authorities, institutions of higher education, local education agencies, and elementary and secondary schools regarding distance and online learning, blended learning, and in-person learning, and the promotion of mental health, social emotional well-being, and communication with parents and families. And coordinate with the director of the Institute of Education Sciences to facilitate, consistent with applicable law, the collection of data necessary to fully understand the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on students and educators, including data on the status of in-person learning. And these data shall be disaggregated by student demographics, including race, ethnicity, disability, English language learner status, and free or reduced lunch status, or other appropriate indicators of family income. So that's just, one more, consult with those who have been struggling for months with the enormous challenges of COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic poses for education, including students, educators, unions, families, state, local, tribal, and territorial officials, and members of civil rights and disabilities rights organizations in carrying out the directives of this order. So that's just part of it, and I'm very excited about that. Contrary to what some folks believe, I really love science and I believe in science. So this week, on Tuesday, we heard that federal health officials weigh in with a call for returning children to the nation's classrooms as soon as possible, depending on that certain mitigation. One, that there's a preponderance of evidence that indicates that in-person instruction can be carried out safely as long as mask wearing and social distancing are maintained. But local officials also must be willing to impose limits on other settings like indoor dining, bars, or poorly ventilated gyms. So I just wanted to note that in spreading this week's news, people leave out that part, the limiting other settings in the community. And that's a really important detail. And then speaking of science, California Department of Public Health issued new, much more detailed guidelines for safe school reopenings. And I've noted that the cohort guidance sticks to the September 4th guidance of no more than 14 children and 2 adults. But this new 52-page guidance released on the 14th of this month covers face coverings, cleaning and disinfection, ventilation, asymptomatic testing, what to do when there's an exposure at school, and the importance of vaccines. I encourage everyone in our community to visit schools.covid19.ca.gov and scroll down and click on the K-12 school guidance and dig in, 52 pages. I attended a webinar this week on school reopening hosted by the California School Board Association. Among the attendees, 46% were from districts in full district learning, 31% were from districts that provide small group instruction and services for a small number of students, 3% were full-time in person, and 14% were in part-time in-person instruction. So key takeaways I learned from the featured districts that reopened when districts could last fall, which were Napa and Solana Beach, which is in Southern California, San Diego. Trust is key. There needs to be trust that teachers and their families, students and their families, and the district and administration are all doing everything possible to keep each other safe. Solana Beach requires every family participating in their hybrid model to sign a contract that lays out the expectations of families. Testing is expensive, as we just heard in that budget report. While there have been no transmissions on campus, as the research supports, Napa has had no infections, and Solana Beach has had 22 employee infections and around 50 child infections, and 16 classrooms have had to close and be quarantined. Safety for employees needs to be established. It's difficult to open schools when there are high community infection rates, and it's hard to stay open even when all of the mitigation measures are in place and followed closely. Then, like a couple hundred other folks, I attended the first in the series of mental health webinars this week. So thank you to Dr. Clark and all the staff who made this happen. It was an opportunity for parents like myself to receive concrete tips on how to support their children, and for parents to express to our counseling, psychology, and social work staff what they need, what we as parents need. A takeaway I'd like to reiterate here is something that I reminded myself last spring when it became clear we weren't coming back to school, and I was stressed about my own student falling behind. It's falling behind according to and compared to who? Besides the fact we're all in this together, what we expect students to know at whatever grade and age is entirely human-made, and we can change it. While we're safe at home, teachers continue to teach and students continue to learn, even when their learning is not what we would have expected this year. We need to give ourselves grace as parents, give our teachers grace, and especially give our children grace. As Dr. Clark closed the session, he said, we are all suffering. As of this morning, we've had 55,835 COVID cases in Contra Costa County, which is an increase of 6,000 since our last board meeting. Our 7-day positivity rate, though, has fallen to 8.8%, but there is a census tract in Bay Point, which is in our school district, which has a positivity rate of 16.5%, and one in Monument that has a positivity rate of 23.6%. I really hope that everyone stays home as much as possible so we can get closer to a safer return to school. And finally, I'm really excited to learn that a committee has been established at Ignacio Valley High School to address the racist imagery associated with their warrior mascot. Last month, Fresno Unified voted to change the mascot imagery for Fresno High School Warriors, so the way has been paved. I appreciate the staff who recognize the problematic imagery and are committed to working in community to change it. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you, Trustee Nzewi. All right, Trustee Mason.
Thank you. I attended on Martin Luther King's birthday, I attended the NAACP's meeting where they had the swearing in of all their new officers, and got to hear from Dr. Mims again. It's always a pleasure to hear from him. He always teaches me something new. I listened to two different webinars, one by Capital Advisors, one through the county about budgets. We're all concentrating on budgets. I attended a webinar about opening schools that was talking about a program in Elk Grove where they've gone with the hubs approach and they're bringing in small groups of kids. And so I was interested in hearing how that was successful for them. I, like all the rest of you, I'm sure, had an interview with the CCEE and found that very interesting. And I also participated, I think some of the other board members did, with our peer coaching group as they looked at what the work that they're doing. I found that very educational and interesting, and thank them for their hard work. And I guess that, oh, and I did have time to pop in on the mental health webinar at the end. It was the same night as another Zoom, but I got to come in toward the end and listen to some of the feedback from the parents. So like I think Trustee Nzewi says, there's a lot going on in this direction. We're spending a lot of time thinking about this. We're not just waiting till we meet once or twice a month to discuss it, but it's on all of our mind all of the time. So, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Mason. Trustee McFerrin.
All right, hello everyone, good evening. I'd like to share that, that I've had a busy couple of weeks doing some exciting things in the district. I too was able to attend the mental health webinar on Monday, and it was wonderful to see so many people from the district providing such exceptional information and to see it so well attended. It was nice, especially to see, some of my former colleagues at Mount who gave really wonderful advice. I also last week was able to attend a budget advisory committee meeting. And so I'm hopeful to attend more of those moving forward. It's really kind of focused on the governor's budget, and there were some really interesting ideas and comments kind of about priorities from the other members of that team. And then let's see, last week I was able to attend a meeting with our TISP group. That's our teacher that's our teacher induction program. And that was a particular interest to me because I have a clear credential. And so I've been through what was called the BITSA program 10 years ago. And then I've served as a mentor in another district, and I serve as a mentor now in Akalani's working through the county program. And so I was doing my own mid-year review with my participating teacher. So it was especially interesting to see how we're supporting our new teachers in Mount Diablo. I was really impressed with the materials that were presented to us, especially there were some really wonderful resources that that our TISP team is has worked to gather, and then they're consistently updating those, which I thought was really wonderful to see. And then let's see. Oh, and then a real highlight for me was a couple of weeks ago, I was invited to observe a transitional kindergarten Zoom class. And I am at home in a classroom, even though I've only ever taught high school. So I was fascinated to see what a Zoom class was like for transitional kindergarten. It was wonderful to see how creative the teacher was, and how much support there was from parents in setting up and helping engage their students, and also really just how hardworking the students were at such a young age. I was really impressed with them. So it was wonderful to have that experience. And that for me is really, the highlight in the last couple of weeks. And so that's as much that I can share.
Fantastic. Thank you, Trustee McFerrin. Trustee Alas.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. I want to start out my report by talking a bit about what the Student Advisory Committee to the Mount Diablo Education Foundation has been working on. Trustee Mayo touched on the Science and Engineering Fair that is coming up in a couple months. The SAC has been working diligently to increase equity and access of that fair to MDOC students. And we have 46 students who filled out the interest form that I spoke about at during my last board report, and they come from various demographics and various high schools. 48 students actually, 18 high school students, 30 middle school students from 15 different schools, 5 high schools, 8 middle schools, and 2 alternative schools. And there are currently 9 students who are formally registered to compete in the fair, and we are going to be providing them resources such as Zoom hubs, mentorships throughout the process to make sure that they have all the tools and resources that they need in order to compete and be successful. So we are working diligently on that with the Contra Costa Science and Engineering Fair team. So that is some good news. I recently attended a webinar held by the California Department of Education called Pathways to Recovery. Linda Darling Hammond spoke. There were superintendents from across the state were there, Superintendent Thurmond. And one of the big emphasis that they placed on, as we think about the next couple of years, and as we think about education, and as we think about how our students have fared and how our students have suffered during distance learning and the deficit that is going to be facing us in a couple of years, they place a very large emphasis on social emotional learning and tutoring, which is why we have an upcoming item later this evening talking about tutoring services specifically for English language learners. And given the fact that state entities have placed such a huge emphasis on tutoring, I'm very excited to see that action item through. But so that was what I learned from that webinar. And then something else that came to my attention, I know that there are a lot of parents, community members out there who are worried about how much we're prioritizing reopening, how much as a state reopening is being prioritized, and in line with what Mr. Gordon was talking about during our fiscal presentation. Right now, the legislature is really packed. They are limiting the amount of bills that they have in their dockets, and any education-related bills, or most education-related bills, are related to COVID, school reopening, and giving funds to schools, and just facilitating that process as much as possible. And just to give an example, AB 10, I believe is the bill number. AB 10 introduced by Assemblymember Ting is focused just exclusively on school reopening, being supported by a lot of prominent names, including Assemblymember O'Donnell. Just know that the legislature is prioritizing COVID and prioritizing schools. Something else that I also attended the mental health webinar on Monday, and that was great to see inputs from counselors and educators from across the district. In line with mental health, I spoke with Dr. Clark about this earlier, and how much student mental health is suffering during this time. And I spoke with President Calland about this, I believe last week. Poway Unified School District and Sacramento City Unified Sacramento City Union School District recently passed a board resolution to expand the definition of personal illness to include mental illness and include mental health. That would, remove a lot of the stigma that students feel associated with talking about mental illness, with talking about mental health, with talking about potentially suicidal thoughts, and hopefully alleviate that stress and that concern with going out and talking to a counselor about that. And I know that we are being very intentional about providing resources as a school district. We are disseminating, the counselor's website and disseminating all those resources. And I know that the mental health webinars and panels are going to continue under Dr. Clark's leadership and guidance. So that is a board resolution that I'm hoping we can bring up to expand that definition and recognize that mental illness is as detrimental to student health as any conventional personal illness could be. So that is something that I'm going to be working on in the next couple days, next couple weeks, months. And then I've spoken a bit about civic engagement and the State Seal civic engagement that we're looking to pioneer as a school district. I know that Samantha Allen and Jennifer Stacks are working to develop the criteria for that. So just a quick update there. I'm also hoping to be able to, this is something that I'm working on with an education advocacy group called GenUp to develop a civic engagement pledge for school districts so that we are, verbally saying that we're prioritizing civic engagement with students and that we're hoping to facilitate voter information about our democracy, and also within that pledge is opting into the State Seal, which we're already in the process of doing. So that's also something to look forward to. And then some good news for all the parents who are looking forward to reopening soon. Sports, CIF sports in the purple tier. So that includes cross country, which is my sport, is coming back. They're all coming back in February. So tennis, golf, I believe, fall under those tiers. And then we're going to be moving forward into March with other sports that can happen during the purple and red tier. So like track, swimming, anything outside that doesn't involve too much contact. So those are coming back in February. Also in line with that, I know that at least at my particular site, Northgate, Glenn Barker is coming back is going to be back on campus in the sports medicine facility, so that athletes are going to have that resource as we head back to sports and head back to competition as we start getting cleared. So that's some good news there. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to report out. I believe that is it. Those are all my reports. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Trustee Alas. Wow, everyone has been very, very busy. You can tell that we're all very focused on education. We continue to educate ourselves, with all of these issues. So thank you all for all of your time and efforts. As for me, I've spent the last few weeks listening to a lot of different perspectives in our district, and I'm sure we've all heard a lot of different perspectives. There's really a wide range that we see out there. On the one hand, we have COVID rates, it's some of the highest that they've ever been. We have new strains emerging. We have families and staff within our MDUSD community that have experienced, the trauma of COVID, or deaths in their family. We are hearing also from staff who are currently on site at our schools and offices including office managers, secretaries, food service workers, custodians, just the fear that people feel, you know, anytime that they're out and exposed to the public. And these are people who are the engine that keeps even our distance learning education running, really ensuring those key supports for students, no matter what level of COVID, you know, we've been in this whole time. On the other hand, we have families who feel that their students are really suffering from the isolation of distance learning with depression, anxiety, even at risk for suicide. And these parents have serious concerns and have been contacting us, asking us to open schools in person now, sharing studies with us about COVID, you know, spreading very little within schools. So I think we have the whole dichotomy of it in our district. But I think one thing that that we do all agree on is that vaccines are a key part of the solution. Vaccinating school employees immediately would greatly help our public schools both to continue the distance learning that we have and the crucial community supports that we're providing, as well as to really facilitate us to be able to adequately plan our safe reopenings of schools. So to that end, I've been communicating with school board presidents from throughout our county. Together, we've drafted a letter to our county health department, county board of supervisors, and local legislators, calling on them to ensure that all education workers in Contra Costa County school districts, particularly those reporting to work in person, have priority access to COVID-19 vaccines, and also that they provide clear communication about how education and childcare workers are to receive their vaccines. In addition, the Contra Costa County School Boards Association, CCCSBA, has added this letter to their meeting agenda for tomorrow night to vote on signing the letter as an organization. All school board members and superintendents are welcome at the meeting. The meeting will begin at 5:30 with a program and presentation on the state budget, very similar to what Kevin Gordon did tonight, but it will be with Mr. Dennis Myers from CSBA, as well as a Q&A, and then the business meeting begins at 6:45. So I just wanted to share all of that is going on. I would like to sign on to the letter as an individual. We have a disclaimer there that it's school board presidents from across the county, but we're signing as individuals. In addition, I want to shout out to Gregory Gardens for posting their wonderful equity project on the National Day of Service webpage, which enabled people all over the nation to support their efforts. And I thought it was a great model that I know many of similar efforts have been going on throughout our various schools, but that was really neat to be able to see them tap into an even wider network of support. And just a reminder for, because we know there's so many wonderful teachers, parent volunteers, staff members out there doing incredible work every day, that anyone can nominate anyone for a Medea Academy Award, and the nominations are due February 26th, and the event is May 6th. And keeping in mind that there's awards for teachers and non-teachers, and the new Social Justice Award to an individual or small team acting to improve equity, racial justice, diversity, and inclusion in our MDUSD schools. So I wanted to make sure to share that out. And lastly, I wanted to thank Dr. Clark, who had posted recently about Zaretta Hammond's book that's called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. I think a lot of people are familiar with that book. And I got some good positive responses out there in the Twitter world, because I think there are a number of Mount Diablo teachers who have read this book, talked about it in book clubs, and in fact, one responded and said, wouldn't it be incredible if, well, actually, Dr. Clark said it would be incredible if these concepts were practiced in every classroom and school. And then one of the teachers responded, suggesting an all MDUSD community read of the book with facilitated discussions throughout the year. So I thought that was a fascinating idea. Would love to hear people's thoughts and input about how we could actualize something like that. Because I would certainly be interested. It's a book that I've learned a lot from myself. And that is all that I have as far as my board report. All right.
Ms. Count?
Yes.
I have a question about the letter you spoke of. We as a board haven't discussed that or made a decision, come to a conclusion about it. So when will that be on the agenda for our district and our board members to discuss? Normally the process is the representative obtains the opinion of the board and then is permitted to sign, and we haven't discussed that.
Right. So I did ask our legal counsel about that because this has just come up in the last day. So it was too short to be able to add it within the 72 hours for this agenda for a formal vote. And the counsel was that because the letter has a specific disclaimer on it that specifies that the people who sign it it does not signify a vote of the school board, that there's not a legal requirement for that. But I wanted to mention it here regardless, so to inform all of you and to share the letter with you so that you can let me know if there are concerns that you have. And I think at our next meeting, February 10th, we could bring forward then a resolution or the letter itself for the board to take formal action on as well.
So you're saying that individuals who attend this meeting can sign based on the disclaimer, but if CCCSBA is taking a vote and their board hasn't discussed it, then the board members that are the representatives should refrain from voting. Is that correct?
So the vote tomorrow night at the CCCSBA meeting is a vote on whether CCCSBA as an organization should sign. And then separately, individually, the board presidents are choosing whether to sign the letter or not. So the vote is only whether CCCSBA as an organization should sign. And again, the letter specifies that it is not saying that every individual school district has voted on this.
I'm having trouble with that. So we'll figure it out tomorrow.
All right. Happy to discuss. Yes. All right. So next we have superintendent's report. Dr. Clark.
Yes, and President Cowan, I just wanted to double check on the committee assignments.
Excuse me. Yes, I skipped over that. All right. So 12.2, thank you, is governing board committee assignments for 2021. So we can hand out the handout to you, but I wanted to announce the committee assignments for this year. So we have the audit committee will be Keisha Nzewi and myself, Cherise Cound. The facilities real estate will be Deborah Mason and Linda Mayo. The budget local control funding formula advisory committee will be Erin McFerrin and Cherise Cound. The career pathways and technical educational advisory committee will be Linda Mayo and Keisha Nzewi. CAC Community Advisory Committee Special Education will be Linda Mayo and Erin McFerrin. The DLAC District English Language Learner Advisory Committee will be Deborah Mason and myself, Cherise Cound. Equity Advisory and Disproportionality Team, Deborah Mason and Cherise Cound. Bond Oversight Committee, Linda Mayo and Deborah Mason. The CCC School Boards Association is Linda Mayo, as we had voted on previously. The Mount Diablo Council of PTAs is Linda Mayo and Cherise Cound. The PAC, Parent Advisory Committee, is Deborah Mason and Keisha Nzewi. And the School Climate Coordinated Health Council is Deborah Mason and Erin McFerrin. And you didn't have to write that down. It can be forwarded to you afterwards in that chart format, but wanted to make sure to announce that. All right, and with that, we will move on to item 13, the superintendent's report. Dr. Clark.
Great, thank you. If I could have technology bring up the PowerPoint. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share this because, I've set a goal to be transparent and to make sure that we are communicating, with our stakeholders and making sure that school administrators and employees have access to communicate with families. And so we implemented Parent Square a couple months ago, and so as a district host, I and others have access to to charts such as this that really track our progress. And so as you can see, it gives us sort of a total count of all the students that we have listed in Aries, all the staff members who we have who have email addresses, and then at least a parent that is represented for each of our students. And so here, this tells us about 95% of our total population is contactable. And so if you look down in the center aisle, you can see the contactable parents and the ones that are not contactable, and then the ones that we have no information for. And then you can also see what languages families are accessing as they utilize the updates in Parent Square. Can I have the next slide, please? And so this is sort of, as you know, with Parent Square, you can either sign up to receive emails, text messages, or you can use the app and get app messages. So this gives us a breakdown of how many parents are getting information through email and through text messages and through apps. And as you can see, large majority of families are utilizing the text message feature. So again, we want to make sure that we are not only pushing information out, but one of the great things about Parent Square is that you can then receive information from parents. So not only our principals, but teachers can have, can go back and forth with communications regarding things that are happening at school or things that are happening in the classroom. So very pleased with, this has just been a short rollout of Parent Square. We've only been using it a couple months, but the expectation is that this will be our number one, our number one tool for communication as we're communicating with our families. Can I have the next slide, please? Parent Square has 12 unique features, and Mount Diablo, currently we are utilizing 7 of those features. And so this document here just gives a breakdown of the posts. So you can see we have 909 posts to over 2,600 direct messages. So those are direct messages that are going out to families. More than likely, these are questions about assignments or things that have to do with what's taking place in the classroom. We do have an ability to give alerts, whether smart alerts, reminders for particular activities that are coming up, and calendar events. And then, there's pictures and photos that are shared and files as well. So again, just an overall demonstration of the uses through Parent Square. Can I have the next slide, please? And then I made sure this was pretty small so that we don't have too much competition amongst our schools, but this does basically show the schools that are using it the most. And so I'll just kind of highlight maybe the first 5. So Woodside Elementary is our highest user, and then it goes down to Sequoia Middle School, Holbrook Language Academy, Valley Verde Elementary, Ignacio High School, and El Dorado Middle School, and Wren Avenue Elementary are pretty much in a dead tie. So again, as superintendent, and as my expectation is that we communicate often and regularly with our families, I can monitor this and provide guidance and assistance to schools that that again haven't fully adopted to Parent Square. I do want to acknowledge that we still have some schools or teachers or principals that are utilizing other platforms, but our goal is to get everyone to transition into Parent Square. So again, just wanted to kind of give that overall update on communication. And then clearly everyone knows that, as we do a Friday letter out of the superintendent's office, and we also do the organizational update that is not only emailed out to all of our stakeholders, but is posted on our website and is there, and memorialized on the superintendent's page. Can I have the next slide, please? So I just, Obviously, a huge topic that that we've been talking about is reopening schools, getting students back on our campuses. We've heard parent comments tonight. We've all received emails. So I just want to spend a couple minutes just kind of talking about this and talking about where we are. As superintendent and as an educator, I want nothing more than our students back on campus. I've been very vocal about that since since I've arrived in this district. When we made the decision over summer to go 100% distance learning, I wanted to I wanted to implement a hybrid model. And as the years gone on, I still feel very strongly about that. And so just so the the staff and public are well aware, is that pretty much I spend all day, every day, reading, talking, listening, observing, all COVID. That's what my day is filled with every single day. So the notion that the district doesn't have a plan, or we're not prepared, or we're not thinking about this, I'm just going to assume that that's coming from a place of people who are fed up with this pandemic and who are advocating very strongly for their kids. And and I'm right 100% with them. I understand the detrimental effects of not being in school and the mental health toll that is taken on our students and families and staff. I mean, we are all suffering through this. However, we are working on ways that we can continue to support students, although we're in a global pandemic. And I just have to, I have to be very clear and just very straightforward, is that we've had a real lack of leadership coming from the federal level. There has not been a consistent messaging, levels of support. It's been politicized. If you wear a mask, then you believe in one political party. If you don't wear a mask, then you align with another political party. And so there's been a lack of information that has been out there, and it's made it extremely difficult for school districts and school boards to be able to make well-informed, well-supported decisions. And as we heard in the presentations earlier, the guidance is still changing, right? So, we've had the governor's budget, we've had the updated to the California Department of Public Health, we've had the update to what the CDE has put out. It's continuing to change. Back months ago, we were debating on whether or not students should wear masks, right? Now we're debating whether or not we should not only test all employees, but test all students. When we priced that out, it would cost us, over $1 million a month this was months ago when we first started looking at this, $1 million a month to test all students and all employees. However, since that time, it has now changed. The price has come down, the price has come down a considerable amount. However, if we would have gone into contract with one of these vendors earlier on, we'd be on the hook for a large sum of those dollars. And so as the guidance changes, as the metrics change, as the leadership changes, we're the ones who are left kind of giving the image that we don't know what's going on because we continue to get different information. So we are hopeful that that with the new administration in and with their clear commitment to fighting this pandemic, that we can be on this path for reopening. So in the meantime, back in November, towards the end of November, right before Thanksgiving break, we did enter into an agreement that that allows students to pick up supplies on campuses, to participate in legally required meetings. So that would be IEP meetings, language testing, psychological testing, things of that nature, they can come on campus and participate in those meetings. In our agreement, we agreed that we would do an in-person PSAT on January 26th. We also agreed that students and staff could participate in voluntary one-on-one meetings, but these were, again, voluntary for staff and voluntary for students, but they can do that. And also, and we've been, we've been practicing this, and that students are able to come on campus and participate in county health athletic or extracurricular activities or on-site childcare programs. So this is, this is on our books. This agreement is posted on our website. I put complete copies of these agreements are on our website under the latest updates for COVID-19 responses. Can I have the next slide, please? So I just wanted to just show a, a picture kind of says 1,000 words, but this was one of the entrances to one of our PSAT sites. So again, there's clear signage, there's hand sanitizers, there's gloves, there's there's wipes, there's spray sanitizer, there's a check-in area. So so again, as we begin to bring students on our campus or continue to bring students on our campus, we will have multiple setups such as this. Can I have the next slide, please? This is what YV looked like yesterday. So you see on the left, when we talk about 6 feet, this is what 6 feet looks like, right? So whatever, however we bring back students back onto our campuses, we're always going to have to implement the 6 feet, right? Until the guidance changes. But the guidance is very clear, 6 feet. That's why we have to have a hybrid model, because we cannot fit 30, 28 kids in a classroom and still have 6 feet distance. So on your left, you see the preparation for the PSAT over at YV, and on the right, you actually see, and I would have to say for the, for the administrators that went around and witnessed this, we were all very emotional when we saw this, because these are kids back on our campus, working right now. So be it. This isn't like fun and games. They're taking the PSAT, but the reports I received, there were not one single issue with kids wearing masks. I know that had been a concern. Would students actually wear their masks? All of these students wore their masks, not only in the testing sites, but even when they went out to the parking lot, and as they were socializing around their cars, they kept a distance and they kept their masks on. I also want to acknowledge the staff that came out and supported these students. We had primarily our classified staff were the ones who supervised these testing sites, and and there were some certificated staff who helped out as well, but mainly it was classified staff. So this is what it looked like to YV. Can I have the next slide, please? This is what it looked like on the left. This is College Park, and again, the 6 feet. So if all of our classrooms were equal to the College Park multi-purpose room, we could bring students back, but for a full day, right? But we can't do that because we have to separate them out. So that's what it looked like before the students got there. And on the right, you have what it looked like at Concord High. And again, there was I personally went to Concord High and witnessed that, and I counted 50 kids taking the exam. Can I have the next slide, please? It was brought up earlier that now that we've moved into purple, athletics can begin to start up. We're starting to again practice this week, and then as they go into next week, the seasons will start, and it's cross country, tennis, golf, swimming, and diving. And this is this is a notice from CIF, and these are some of our high school cross country kids. Can I have the next slide, please? This is our coaches throughout the district. They have been holding these workouts since summer, and and I just want to highlight that these coaches are absolutely amazing. They're pretty much, if you multiply out the time that they put into it, they are by far our lowest paid employees in the entire district, and they do an incredible service. So as you can see, there's multiple kids here at this campus, stretching. You can see, obviously it's nighttime. Obviously the kids are wearing masks, and they're on our campuses. They're being safe. They have a distance, but it's so important for these types of events to happen. And the more that we can do things like one-on-one meetings, athletics, extracurricular, things like that, then we can start to, really test our systems that we have in place. I mean, we have cleaning protocols. We have, these athletes have been going through, the pod, the pod setups. When there's an issue, there's been contact tracing. They all are, they know the expectations. The coaches have been trained. I mean, so we're doing this on a daily basis in our throughout the district. However, we still need to do more, and there's still lots of unanswered questions that we are trying to work out. So I just really want to highlight that this is a great thing that's taking place in our district, and I'm more than sure that it's probably taking place as we speak right now. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is what our county metrics looked like just a week ago. We were at 105 new cases for every 100,000, and that's statewide. And as you see in our county metrics, we were at 60 cases per 100,000. If you remember back when the board approved our reopening plan and our timeline and whatnot, we were at a county metric of 5 cases. So you can just see how it's exploded, and this is what it looked like 1 week ago. However, can I have the next slide, please? However, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are good things starting to happen. As I brought up about the new leadership, I brought up about the new focus. We have a vaccine on the horizon, and our numbers now are starting to drop. So this is from yesterday, and you can see the slide I just showed you at the state level a week ago, it was at 105, and now it's down to 71. And in the county, we were at 60 a week ago. Now it's down to 44. So it's going to, fingers crossed that it's going to continue to improve. So what we don't want is we don't want to rush this. Again, it is my responsibility to bring the recommendation to the board. It's not the unions, it's not the parents, it's not the classified staff or anyone else. This rests solely on my shoulders as superintendent. I take this responsibility very seriously, and I want to make sure that we have a system that is proven and that is safe and that is effective. And again, we have been left with 300 separate school districts throughout the state, all to navigate this on our own. So again, there are no open districts in Contra Costa County right now. There are no open districts in Alameda County right now. So I know we've heard of Napa, we've heard of some districts opening in Marin, and I can go online right now and I can pull articles that are going to support reopening, and I can pull articles that make a case not to support reopening. So I understand that. So I really sympathize for our families out there who are getting these mixed messages, either from the previous administration or what you pick up in the daily newspaper or on different websites, depending on where you get your news from. But these are what we are following. We are still in the middle of a global pandemic. There is still, new strands of COVID that are mutating, and so I'm still taking this extremely serious. I'm not, I'm not downplaying this, and I know that there's lots of people out there who just think tomorrow let's open schools, or as soon as we go to red, let's open schools, or it's just not that simple, and it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I'm going to make sure that we turn over every stone and we make sure that all I's are dotted and all T's are crossed in terms of safety and in terms of district-wide spread of this very deadly disease. Can I have the next slide, please? This is I pulled this from the Contra Costa County Health Department website. They have they update this every other day or so. But as of yesterday, there's been 93,531 vaccines administered in Contra Costa County. 78,000 of those were individuals' first doses, and 14,000 of those were individuals' second doses. So 8.5% of the population 16 and older have received their first dose, and 1.6% of the population have received their second dose. So again, vaccines are coming, right? Again, we learned that there was no articulation at the federal level with the states, and there was an articulation from the state to the counties. That's why we're hearing about different counties opening up vaccines to educators or to people over 65 or people in convalescent homes or what it is. That's why it's all disjointed. So how can we properly plan when all the information we are getting is disjointed? And so I am pleased to say that the state has taken over the vaccination program, so it will not be left up to the counties, and so that's good news. And so we can be on a clear, consistent program to offer vaccinations, to our communities, to our employees, and in some cases, depending on their age, to students. And so I'm not saying that we're waiting until every single person is vaccinated, because it's voluntary whether or not you get vaccinated. So it's just real hard to give a definitive of this is what needs to happen when before we bring kids back on our campus. But what does need to happen is we need to have consistent, reliable information so that we can properly open. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, just last week, a week ago, we had another agreement where we can start with the small support hubs, right? So small group support hubs, SGSH. So administration will identify which students are in most need. Now, of course, we want to target, homeless, foster youth, special education, things of that nature. But as I've said before, many times, this disease does not discriminate, right? Everyone is suffering, and so through the administration, we will identify students, we will invite students in, we will cohort them, and we will put them in support hubs. It's voluntary for students, and it's voluntary for staff. So again, we have to work through this, and we can't just snap our fingers and expect this to just happen. We're developing this, we're working on this, but these are positive steps in a good direction. Okay, so and as you can see from the agreement, we do have to follow some measures when it comes to what tier we're on, and so again, this agreement is an 8-page agreement. So I just pulled out a couple sentences from it just to give an overall, but you can read the entire agreement on our website, which is posted under the latest updates for COVID-19 response. Can I have the next slide, please? So reopening update. We're always going to look at those county metrics. They're not there yet. So again, and if we were to if we were to go into red tomorrow, does that mean that we're going to open? No, it does not, because we still have widespread of the disease. There are still people getting sick. There are still people in the ICUs, and there's still people who are passing away from this deadly disease. And I know that much has been said about students, that students aren't dying from COVID. However, we still do not fully understand the long-term effects of this disease when it does happen. And students do come down with COVID. They do catch COVID. They're not immune to catching the virus. They may not get sick at the same rate as some of the more advanced age individuals are getting, or people with underlying health conditions, but they're still contracting the virus. We need consistent federal, state, and county guidance, and it continues to change. So every piece of guidance that has come out has been dissected by staff. We've looked at it. We have our plans in place. We're ready for this, but the guidance continues to change. The latest is that every staff member and student are going to be tested every 2 weeks. And we heard earlier that is something that we cannot guarantee at this point that could happen. We cannot deliver that, and that guidance more than likely is going to change because others are sharing that. Transparent safety measures. So yes, so the safety measures are the same as they have been since since summertime. Social distance, mask wearing, sanitation, and filtration systems. And I've shared before, we've changed. We're in the process of changing all of our filters to the MERV 13s. Testing and vaccinations. I've kind of touched on that already. We still need to flesh that out of what that is going to look like, and family commitments to hybrid schedule or distance learning. So absolutely, I was ready to go out with the survey back in November to have, actually November, December, to have parents commit to one or the other. Parents said that they wanted more information. They wanted, number one, they wanted to ensure that their student kept their teacher and that they stayed at their same school. So I put out a schedule that reflected that. And although I put the schedule out, one for elementary and one for secondary, folks still needed more information, and unfortunately, there's other steps that need to happen before that information can be finalized. So when the time comes, we will absolutely. Our survey is ready to go, and we will ask parents for that commitment. Either you're in the hybrid or you're not, and that's gonna happen soon. I've said at the January 13th meeting, when this was an agenda item, I said that we were in distance learning at least until March. So again, there's no reason to put it on the agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about it. I talk about it all day, every day with staff. We have an all-day negotiations scheduled for tomorrow. So these things are happening. So I meet with. And this is more for the public, the board clearly knows this, but I meet with every board member for an hour every single week. More than likely, we talk about reopening and what that looks like and what's the district doing, and all of those things. So again, we're working on this. It's just not the time right now to open up our schools tomorrow. Can I have the next slide, please? I just wanted to touch real briefly on the mental health webinar. We posed 4 questions to our esteemed panel. We wanted to get information from a panel how parents, guardians can create social opportunities for their students during distance learning. We understand that's a challenge. How can you find support for child's social emotional well-being within the district resources? How can I best support my child academically, right? A lot of parents fear that their students are falling behind and whatnot. That's very real, and we gave suggestions on how they can support their child academically. And then there are many students who are lacking motivation during this pandemic, and how can parents, families, guardians support students in becoming more engaged in their classes? Can I have the next slide? And this was actually the panel. So we had counselors from all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high, an equity counselor, because we fully understand that COVID, the effects of COVID, adversely impacts communities of color. We had a psychologist on the panel. We had a social worker on the panel. We had a behavioral specialist on the panel, and we had our college and career advisor on the panel. So it was a very diverse panel. Coming up over the next couple of weeks, we are going to use different folks and sort of specialize this a little bit more, just again to continue to provide support for our families who we know are out there struggling. And all families are struggling in this because we've all have had our ways of life drastically changed. Can I have the next slide, please? So I just want to end on a couple. Let's end on a couple like high notes of things that are going on. So, life in a middle school. So middle school life. So Oak Grove Middle School, this was their Great Kindness Challenge. So it shows like each day of the week, So I mean, I'm just, these are those things that just really just, remind you of why you're in this profession. Like, here they are really trying to implement kindness and tap on the good things about what kids have to offer and what they can do, to really positively impact the lives of others. And then I'm excited to see this. This is a courtyard beautification. This is the before shot. So I'm excited to see what's going to be the after shot. But again, Oak Grove put this out there, and so we're excited to see the progress that they make on their beautiful courtyard. Can I have the next slide, please? This is the library at Foothill Middle School. And so again, you can see, in many of our spaces, they're being social distanced out. So, the way that we sat in the past, we just can't do with the current guidance that's out there, that we have to have people 6 feet apart in. And I know some people's eyes might be bad, but that is the Bernie meme in the back there that the school put out. So anyway, we got to lighten this up a little bit, because there really is just so much pain out there. Can I have the next slide? This is from Mount Diablo High School. This is their digital innovation and design classes, and these are staff who are putting these together for our students to pick up and be able to take home and work on. So things are happening. I mean, for one, I said it at the beginning of this presentation, I want kids back on campus, right? But it can't happen right now. So we're doing the best we can to get through the worst situation that any of us have lived through on a national and global perspective. But these are the staffs at Mount Diablo High putting together these CTE package for the digital innovation and design course. Can I have the next slide? And just to kind of end my presentation, I just want to highlight 3 students from Olympic High that they're in alternative school and credit deficient or whatnot, and even during a pandemic. And again, I don't know the story of these students, but they earned their diploma during these times. And so I wanted to recognize that and highlight that. And these students' achievements weren't only done by only them. There were others that contributed to that. So whether it was, the support they had at home or the support they had at the school site, we really want to take this opportunity to recognize these students. And there's others out there, but I just pulled these 3 photos of these 3 students. So that concludes my presentation. Next slide. I think it's just for questions. So if I can entertain any questions from any of the trustees, I'd be happy to. If not, very happy to move on to the other business of the board.
All right, trustees, any questions, comments?
Good. And I've done a thorough job at explaining. So again, heart goes out to all students, all families, all staff, everybody. But we're going to get through this, and there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll continue working on it. But the responsibility falls on my shoulders, and I take that responsibility very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. I really appreciate all the information that you're sharing and the progress that has been made. I think, you know, a lot of people have questions about reopening and where that was on our agenda, and it is under superintendent's report. That's where we have been reporting it every meeting, and we'll continue to do that. And I know that in December, we as a board, you know, expressed very clearly that we wanted, you know, negotiations progress on small groups. And so the fact that that was able to be achieved last week so that small groups that there is an official agreement with our employees, with our teachers union on that is progress. And we need to recognize that, as well as I appreciate you talking about how students are engaging in person in different ways, because I think not everyone was aware that that is happening and in the ways in which it is allowed under our current agreements to be happening. So much appreciated, and we'll continue to move forward. So thank you so much. All right, next we have the consent agenda 14.0. Items listed under consent agenda are considered routine and will be approved and adopted by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. However, any item may be removed from the consent agenda upon the request of any member of the board and acted upon separately. Do we have any items to pull, or do we have a motion for our consent agenda?
I would be happy to make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Trustee Mason.
Second.
All right, motion by Trustee Mason and second by Trustee Mayo. And we'll put that to a vote. So we'll start off with our student board member, Trustee Alas.
Yes.
Trustee Mayo.
Yes.
Trustee Mason.
Yes.
Trustee McFerrin.
Yes.
Trustee Nzewi.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Motion passes 5-0 with concurrence from our student board member. Thank you very much. All right, moving right along, we have, that moves us to 17.0 business and action items. 17.1 is review and potential approval of the Williams quarterly report for January 31st, 2021.
I will take that. Are there any questions about the Williams report?
I have a question.
Yes.
How does the district use these reports? Because it's just it's like more of a checklist than helping us understand what people might have a complaint about. How has the district, or how could the district use it to better inform the community and about what could be going wrong, or could be founded that it's not going wrong, so that we can, when it is wrong, work together to make changes, the systemic changes that might be necessary.
Right. So what the board is saying on this is just this is the format of the report that we have to present in a public meeting. However, these these complaints are coming in the form of, whether it's a work order or whether it's a formal complaint that's filed. We have board policy, and we have we have a process for filing a Williams complaint that falls under Ms. Sachs' department. And so I'll let her just kind of jump in there a second and just explain what the Williams process is. But again, I just want to remind the board that you're just seeing the template that we have to turn into the state or the county.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Clark. So in 2000, there was a lawsuit, and what the court decided was that every school district needed to have a complaint process when there were questions about instructional materials and questions about misassignments of staff, facility issues, as well as at that point, it had to do with the high school exit exam. High school exit exam is no more, but we still have the responsibility when there are complaints about textbooks, instructional materials, misassignments, or facilities in order to investigate and to rectify them. But most importantly, to be transparent with the public, to let folks know quarterly whether or not there's been official Williams complaints filed. So this is something you'll see several times a year. Each of our department heads are the ones that sign off. You're seeing that there were 2 listed in the last quarter. They were on 1 complaint, but there were 2 issues that were identified. One was a question with regards to a teacher credential, whether or not the individual was properly credentialed for the subject area that they were teaching in. And then there was a question whether or not the student had adequate textbooks. We do investigate all Williams complaints. And so this is something that's either done through the facilities, the maintenance and operations department, or the staff that I work with. In this complaint, we did work with human resources to determine that the teacher was indeed properly credentialed and that the student did indeed have the proper textbooks. What we also end up doing in this situation is when there is a complaint filed after the investigation, we do make sure that the investigation as well as the resolutions are in writing and that we submit that back to the complainant. So this is something that's logged at the county office as well. And every year, actually, the county office does physical visits of our campus and review of our documents to ensure that our facilities are in good shape, that we have adequate textbooks, and that our teachers are properly credentialed for what they're teaching.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I wonder if in the future for the quarterly Williams reports, we can just like get that kind of detail since you were able to give it today. That comes along. I know the report is a template, but the detail would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on this? I believe this is, oh, this is for action. So we do need a motion to approve this
I
report.
will make a motion that we approve the Williams quarterly report for January 31st, 2021.
Second.
All right, motion by trustee Mason and second by trustee Mayo. We'll take this to a vote. Trustee Ellis.
Yes.
Trustee Mason.
Yes.
Trustee Mayo.
Yes.
Trustee Nzewi.
Yes.
Trustee McFerrin.
Yes.
I also vote yes. Motion passes 5-0 with concurrence from our student board member. Thank you. And thank you for the input, Trustee Nzewi. I think oftentimes when we receive this report, it's all zeros. So there's not a lot of information to go with it. But in this case, there was something. So you're always welcome to ask those questions. All right. 17.2 is review and potential approval of the contract between Mount Diablo Unified School District and FEV Tutoring to provide online tutoring support to English learners in grades 6 to 12. Dr. Clark?
Yes, and I'm going to turn this over to our EL department. If there's questions, you guys may, actually, let me stop. Are there questions from the board? If you have questions, I have a rep from our EL department who could entertain those questions. But if there's no questions, then there's no need to entertain it.
I have questions.
Go ahead.
Hold on. I thought there was a presentation attached to this. Sorry. In the description on the agenda, it says it's for ELL or district identified failing students regardless of language. Well, is it regardless of language? It says or district identified failing students. And I wasn't sure if it applies to English language learners who are failing or all students.
That I didn't do a board presentation because all the information was attached to the board docket. Now, this is an initiative from the English Learner and Dual Language Services Department, and it's gonna be paid with categorical funds from Title III. So it's going to be only for English learners.
Okay, I was just clarifying because in the description it says or district identified failing students. So I didn't know if that was only English language learner district identified failing students.
It's only for English learners because it's being paid out of Title III, which are categorical funds for English learners.
Another question is, I've heard from teachers and well, even my own daughter who I've forced to go to office hours, that they already struggle getting students to attend office hours. So how would this be more successful than what teachers are already able to offer?
You know, we are going to have two approaches. You know, students are going to be able to go for homework help, and we are going to identify cohorts of students that are having difficulties in their classes, and they will give in to a block of tutoring hours to help them improve their grades. Now, one of the reasons why we selected this company, it's because they will provide support with the families and engaging the families and contacting them so the students can participate.
Is there any way that also like classified staff could be utilized to contact families now? Like I said, if teachers are offering time as they have office hours, which I know is not one-on-one tutoring, I'm not equating the two, but if these are for students who are struggling, I'm just curious, have we invested in engaging families so that the students are engaged with their own teacher?
You know, regarding this project, there's going to be a rollout, okay? Now, regarding to your question about the engagement of the parents, every site has different resources on how do they engage their families. And one of them is the community liaison, you know, that they work with the families at their side. But that changes from one school to the other.
Did you ask teachers and parents if this program would be helpful to their students?
You know, we discussed it with the DLAC. You know, every year I put a pot of money for intervention, and usually was given to the schools. And depending of the schools, some teachers would do tutoring and other ones wouldn't. So it was not everybody was receiving the same support. So this year, teachers were very stressed with the online. So I couldn't launch the tutoring done by the teachers. Therefore, I looked for an outside service, and I did research about what companies there were. Actually, I look at two companies. One is paper, and the other one is FEB Tutors. And I went with FEB Tutors because they provided more support. Not only they have the capability to provide homework help, but also to provide a specific tutoring aligned to what we are teaching, you know.
So the DLAC did want to do an online tutoring.
The DLAC wanted additional support for their students. And I didn't have a way to get the teachers. And Dr. Clark, maybe a couple of meetings ago, he showed an statistics of one school of the English learners, the percentages that they were failing, you know. And we do have in the district a specific funds that are for English learners to support them.
I understand.
And so that's why I make that decision to go with this, it's a new initiative for us, and we are going to see if what successful we are. Now, something that was very attractive to me is that we are going to get a coach and a data coach, so they will be able to run reports for us. You know, categorical programs are heavily monitored, and you require a lot of data. And with one of the companies that I look at, they didn't provide any of those services. That's why I went with this company. Additionally, if when we enter into an agreement, you know, I want to see how is this agreement going to benefit the students in the district. And this company gave us a grant of 1,000 hours over what we were buying. And the other company didn't want to do anything additional for us. So that was another reason.
Yeah, my questions aren't related so much to why choosing this company, just why choosing this now. So the last thing I'll just offer is that another takeaway I got from the School Board Association's reopening webinar is that we need to find flexible opportunities for other adults to help students like this, right? Because our teacher workforce really needs a break. They've been working very hard all pandemic and to this day and until forever, but teachers work very hard. But I feel like just like teachers, students are Zoom fatigued, are tired of being online. And so I wonder if there's any consideration in utilizing this program over the summer, which in a time when everyone gets sort of a break, but 10 to 12 hours over the summer for a student who's already struggling getting online now on the day-to-day could be, I'm not like assuming that everyone is, but could be that maybe it would be more effective because they don't have to compete the hour a week of tutoring with the pressure of daily Zooms. So that's just my last thought. And yeah.
You know, we have a situation in which students are failing, and we need to provide support to this group of students, okay? And we are gonna use the hours as long as we have the hours. And if we see that they are effective, we can buy more hours, but we need to support the students that are failing. And the fact that the situation was not conducive to do tutoring in person because we could only have one-on-one, you know, and we don't have the manpower to that teachers, they didn't want to come on campus, you know, so we had to find another way that support the students.
Right, just to be clear, I'm not against supporting the students at all, and I'm not even against offering. Because I think having, like I said, I learned this week, having other adults have the opportunity to help support students, I think is great. And there's examples of that in neighboring districts, even just through a core of volunteers. And so I was just curious if we'd explored offering it in the summer because people are Zoom fatigued and it could be more concentrated time. So, and I mean, different discussion, but I also don't think students should be getting grades now. So, because that's not inspiring to have an F, but in the summer they could still catch up because the point isn't the grade. The point is, I think, is actual learning and the actual absorption and understanding and knowledge building, regardless of the grade.
And that's what I appreciate about it right now, that it's homework help for students who are like looking for the help right now. And it's one other avenue. So I look forward to seeing how successful it is, how many people use it, what works, what doesn't. It's, you know, I think some other school districts, like I think Pittsburgh was using that other company that you mentioned, and offering tutoring, I think not only to English students, but maybe wider. So I would be curious about that too. If this is successful, do we consider, you know, using COVID funding or things like that to expand to even more students using other funding sources if it's successful. I really like that this particular company is focused on connecting with the families and not just kind of providing a rote service. You know, like I've seen some other ones where you can text this number and they will, with your problem, and then they will just send you the answer. You know, we really need that relationship building and the connection with the family. And there seems to be some focus with this there. So I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions?
I have one, please.
Yes, Trustee Mayo.
I appreciate the information from staff that all of the tutors are credentialed and that every tutor will have a background check. For me and I believe Ms. Mason, that's usually pretty important. We always look for that information on the documents, and that information was provided to us from staff. So that's an important piece for our parents to understand and for the record. And to Ms. Nzewe's comment about students being tired of Zoom, I think this will be a little bit different because it'll be one-on-one and it can be virtual in addition to texting. And although my experience with teenagers, especially teenagers, is they are up at 2 and 3 in the morning or whenever, and this service will be available to them 24/7. So it's surprising when adults watch TV and when students decide it's time to do their homework. And that'll be an opportunity to measure is, for one thing, how often or how many hours are our students up to accomplish the work that needs to be done for a variety of reasons. We can't judge that. I think the other thing that was interesting to me was that these will be recorded. Every interaction will be recorded with the students. So perhaps the Mrs. Garza's department will look at some of these and find good examples of how these tutors work with our students and be able to apply that to some of our instruction methods or how they engage with the students. So I'm interested in trying this as a pilot. And my one question was, since these are federal dollars, if we did not spend them, would they have to be returned?
You know, we have 18, depending of the funding, we have 18 months to spend the money.
Right.
And we never want to return money.
Right.
And as Ms. Garces has shared, our original plan, of course, was to have actual teachers be the ones to engage in after-school tutoring and other situations where they could provide one-on-one support for students or a small group support. So, you know, keeping, you know, it within that vein of trying to provide that supplemental interaction with an individual that can help them either on a standard, with homework, or with a piece of writing. We've got emerging bilingual students, we've got emerging bilingual parents, and they are not yet possibly comfortable looking at, especially the secondary pieces of writing, in order to provide that level of feedback. So as we're thinking about additional time on the Zooms, it actually might be the student submitting a piece of writing and having then that individual help walk them through where they might feel that, you know, edits or corrections could be made. And so not only are we looking at supporting the students with their progress, but we're also supporting that family unit so nobody feels that there's not a resource that's available in the event that that student does need that. For them, it's their, you know, the second language support. Their first language they're off and running, but as they're becoming an emergent bilingual student, biliterate student, that level of support from the home would be incredibly, we think, important in these times.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion on this item?
Yes, I will make a motion that we approve the contract between Mount Diablo Unified School District and FEV Tutoring to provide online tutoring support to English learners in grades 6 to 12.
Thank you, Trustee Mason. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right. Motion by Trustee Mason, second by Trustee McFerrin. Any further discussion? All right, we'll start with the vote with Trustee Alas.
Yes.
Trustee Mason.
Yes.
Trustee McFerrin.
Yes.
Trustee Nzewi. Did your sound go out again? I think that was a yes.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Okay, thank you. I also vote yes. Motion passes 5-0 with concurrence from the student board member. Thank
Linda
you very
Vea
much.
votes yes too.
Oh my goodness. Well, now it's a vote of 5-0. Thank you so much. It's really hard to keep track with all these squares on the screen. Much appreciated. All right. So that was item 17.2. We have no items for 18.0. 19.0, 20 is future agenda items. Are there any future agenda items? All right, and hearing none, we will adjourn the meeting here at 9:24 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.